Republicans have drawn blood in that Tennessee Senate race. Dr. Bill Frist upsetting and ousting incumbent Jim Sasser.
A very big Republican gain. Jim Sasser was planning to run for leader of the Democrats in the Senate.
And in the second Tennessee Senate seat open, the Republican Fred Thompson has defeated the Democrat. This is 2 wins, 2 Republican wins for the Republicans.
Democrat Jim Cooper, not very close to President Clinton, was the author of a competing health care plan.
In the Oklahoma Senate race, the winner is Jim Inhofe. The Republicans make a pickup there, Bill.
That's a pickup, too, for the Republicans, defeating Dave McCurdy, the chairman of the Democratic Leadership Council, a moderate Democratic organization.
Another pickup for the Republicans in the state of Maine. Congresswoman Olympia Snowe wins the Maine seat.
That's George Mitchell's seat. He'll be leaving the Senate, and he'll be turning over his seat to a Republican.
In Massachusetts, CNN tonight declares incumbent Edward Kennedy the winner.
Finally, some good news for the Democrats. Once thought endangered, Republicans fantasized about beating him. They did not do it.
And in Missouri, the Republicans hang on to a seat that was vacated by a Republican, John Ashcroft, the winner.
But John Ashcroft, the Republican who's going to the Senate, is much more conservative than the Senator Danforth he's replacing.
In Maryland, CNN declares Paul Sarbanes, the incumbent, the Democrat, the winner.
He beat Bill Brock, a former senator from Tennessee, who wanted to become the new senator from Maryland.
And another Democrat hangs on in the state of Connecticut, Joseph Lieberman. He's the incumbent. He has won.
Never in any serious trouble. He is a moderate Democrat.
Let's go to Delaware. In that Senate race, the winner, William Roth, the incumbent, will go back to Washington.
Democrats had some dreams of defeating Bill Roth. He's 73 years old, I think, because of his longevity, but he survived.
In the state of Texas, the Republicans hold on to the Senate seat held by Kay Bailey Hutchison.
She had some legal problems, but she got through them, and she's been elected now to her first full term in the United States Senate.
And as our viewers are digesting all those numbers, let's take a look and see what the scorecard looks like. Going into the election tonight, the Republicans held 44 Senate seats, the Democrats 56 seats. 22 races are undecided.
41 in the Republican column and 37 Democrats. Bill, these are significant moves up for the Republicans.
5-seat gain by the Republicans so far. 2 in Tennessee, Oklahoma, Maine, and we reported earlier in Ohio. That's 5 out of the 7 they need to get a Republican majority in the United States Senate.
They're getting closer, and we should know perhaps in the next hour whether it's going to happen.
That's right.
All right, we've got some other numbers we want to take a look at in Massachusetts. The governor's race. This is not going to be a surprise. William Well, the Republican incumbent, has held on. Bill Schneider?
That's impressive because Massachusetts is one of the most democratic states in the country, and he's a Republican.
In Michigan's gubernatorial race, the winner, John Engler, the incumbent, a Republican.
Yes, he is a very popular Republican. He did a lot to change the school financing system. He's unpopular with the teachers in Michigan, but he won anyway.
And in Illinois, no surprise, Jim Edgar hangs on to that seat for the Republicans.
He defeated a woman Democrat, Dawn Clark Netsch. She's a lakefront liberal candidate who talked about raising taxes to pay for education.
In Kansas, a pickup by the Republicans, Bill Graves.
Yes, that's an important pickup for the governor in Kansas. He replaces Joan Finney, a Democratic woman governor who decided not to run for another term.
And in the neighboring state of Oklahoma, Frank Keating picks up this seat. It was an open seat. He picks it up.
That's right. The Democratic vote split. There was an independent candidate, formerly a Democrat, who split the Democratic vote in Oklahoma.
In Virginia, that Senate race, North and Rahm still too close to call with 27% of our total in. Rob continues slightly ahead of Oliver North with independent Marshall Coleman trailing behind.
We're also still counting the votes in the state of Florida. We only have 3% of the precincts reporting at this hour, 52,000 to 50,000. Jeb Bush is ahead at this hour, but it is very early in the counting.
In West Virginia, the Senate race, no surprise here. Robert Byrd will be going back to Washington for the umpteenth time.
That's the ultimate test of incumbency. He's trying to move the entire federal capital to West Virginia piece by piece. A lot of pork barrel spending in West Virginia.
All right, Bill, some governors, any real surprises in this collection of results?
I think the Kansas governor that went to a Republican is a bit of a surprise, although it's a very Republican state. That looked like it might be a tight race. We're still seeing a very tight race in Florida. Some of the early polls show that Lawton Chiles should win that race, but he's got a real tough fight on his hands with Jeb Bush.
Watergate lawyer, actor Fred Thompson going to Washington. He wore a red plaid shirt in the campaign. He rented a pickup truck and campaigned around the state, trying to look normal.
There are those who say the White House isn't too sad to see Representative Cooper lose that race because he wasn't on the team with Bill Clinton, and he seemed to lose a lot of Democratic support. Of course, they need his vote in the Senate to keep a majority, and they're sad on that account. If they could keep a majority without Cooper in the Senate, I think the White House would be happy to do that.
One of the states where we're still counting some numbers is in Texas, where the Senate race remains unresolved. CNN's Tony Clark is at Richards headquarters. Tony, what are the Richards people saying to you at this hour?
Well, right now everybody is concerned, cautious, waiting right now. The polls across Texas, in much of Texas, have closed, but in areas that are very important to the Richards campaign, like El Paso, the polls are still open. Chuck McDonald, the campaign press spokesman for Ann Richards, and you can hear that the band has just started up here. Chuck, are there reasons to be optimistic? The governor said she's cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, Tony, there are. In El Paso, the vote looks good. In South Texas, it's up 5 to 8% across the board, the turnout. We've got big weights in the last 3 hours of voting in traditional Democratic strongholds in our major cities. So that's very encouraging. If turnout's up, it could be very good for Ann Richards.
The governor said this afternoon that most of her supporters, many of her supporters, would be coming out in the afternoon. She said they are working people, and you say what you're seeing is a large number coming out?
That's right. We were very relieved to see the lines start forming in the working parts of town all over Texas. That's real encouraging. It's going to be a long night, but I think we're going to win this thing.
But even at that, it should be a long night.
Yeah, it's going to be a close race. El Paso, get out there and vote.
Chuck, thank you very much. It should be a long night. This is one of the tight races of the evening. I'm Tony Clark at Ann Richards headquarters. Back to the national desk.
Tony, you're going to need some earplugs before this night is over. Mike Capps is in Austin, too. He's at the George Bush headquarters. What's it like there, Mike?
Well, Bernie, here at the George Bush headquarters, optimism and a lot of confidence, to be quite honest with you. That in spite of the fact that George W. Bush, the son of former President George Bush, is running against a woman who arguably was the most popular governor in Texas since John Conley. This day has been a day of confidence for Mr. Bush, but it's also been a day of levity. It seems that he went away from his home this morning on his way to vote and realized he left his voter registration card at home, but they let him vote anyway. With me is Karen Hughes, who is the communications director for the Bush campaign. He's made a lot of this business of having to redefine himself in light of his father. And I know you had a lot to do with that. How did you do it?
Well, actually, I didn't do it. George Bush did it, and he deserves all the credit in the world. I think what he did, Mike, was he delivered to Texas a very specific and very positive, constructive message of change. If the network polls are true and George ends up winning tonight, this will be a mandate for change in Texas. He talked about better schools in Texas. He talked about reducing crime, building safer neighborhoods, safer streets, and he talked about reforming a welfare system that's spawned a cycle of dependency on government.
What's happened here in Texas? I mean, arguably, things are going pretty well. Why change?
Well, again, I don't think things are going that well. George Bush said all along that if you're happy with the status quo, you should not be for him. What Texans said today is they are not happy. They think we can do better. We can do a better job of educating our children and of protecting our innocent citizens from violent crime, particularly gang violence and the rising incidence of youth violent crime.
Thank you very much, Karen Hughes, Communications Director of the George W. Bush campaign. Now back to the national desk.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, we're going to come back in a minute and talk to Bill Schneider about some interesting exit poll information we're getting.
That's right.
And throughout this night, at the bottom of your screen, you'll be seeing results as we get them in. We'll put them out to you so you can be brought up to speed on other races as we report to you. Back in a moment.
On this election night with so many close races to keep an eye on, we are not just looking, Bernie and Bill, at the raw vote totals. We're also looking at interviews that were done with voters as they came away from the polling places today. And Bill Schneider, you are keeping a close eye for us on what these voters were telling the people who were asking the questions.
And we can find out why certain candidates won and why they're not doing too well. Let's look at Massachusetts. Ted Kennedy won that state. Women voters in Massachusetts, there were just over half the voters, voted for Kennedy 62-38 over Mitt Romney. And as we can see, they provided his margin of victory because among men voters in Massachusetts, it was a tie. Women were the key to Kennedy's victory in Massachusetts. Another reason why Kennedy won, 58% of the voters in Massachusetts approved of President Clinton's performance, and they voted about 4-1 for Kennedy over Romney. This is Clinton's best state of all the states we exit poll today, and that was another reason. That's where Clinton's support helped Kennedy immensely. Now let's look at the state of Texas, where Ann Richards and other Democrats in trouble. Among women voters there, Richards has a very narrow lead over George Bush. She did 19 points better among women the last time she ran in 1990. Men are voting 57% for George Bush. Now, the 1992 Perot voters, remember that Perot endorsed Ann Richards, campaigned with Ann Richards. What happened to the 1992 Perot voters in Texas? They're voting for the Republican, for George Bush. They're not following the lead of Ross Perot in that race. Another reason why Ann Richards is in trouble. And finally, in Tennessee, Jim Sasser was defeated for re-election. Why? Because the top issue in Tennessee was, the voters felt it was time for a change. That was the top issue, and almost all of them voted for the Republican candidate, Bill Frist, who won that election and defeated the incumbent. Judy?
All right.
Let's go down to
We're
Bruce
interchangeable.
Morton at the Senate desk to take a closer look. Bruce?
Bernie, first of all, a look at Massachusetts on a night when so many Republicans are winning. It seems only fair to pay a little attention to Massachusetts, where one of the aging Democratic lions, Edward Moore Kennedy, has won another 6 years. Kennedy, pouchy, paunchy, looking so bad, in fact, that one critic referred to him as a manatee in a suit, nevertheless managed to win. He was helped by the debates, which proved he'd set very low expectations that he could speak a sentence in English. But what really started to turn the campaign around was when he began running negative ads against his Republican opponent, Mitt Romney, the Kennedy-esque looking one in this race, attacking what had been one of Romney's strengths, his ability as a businessman who was creating jobs.
I'd like for him to show me where these 10,000 jobs that he's created are.
I don't think Romney's creating jobs because he took every one of them away.
I'd worked there 30 years, and I never dreamed that I'd lose my job.
Mitt Romney says he helped create 10,000 jobs. The former workers at SCM in Marion, Indiana, say something else.
If he's created jobs, I wish he could create some here, instead of taking them away.
So Kennedy wins in Massachusetts, one Democratic lion who remains in the Senate. In Tennessee, though, it was exactly a different kind of story. Bill Frist, the challenger, wore all through the campaign what he called his lucky tie. It was a U.S. flag pattern tie. He may now, I suppose, wear it when he takes the oath of office in the Senate. He's a heart surgeon, does heart transplants, was the head of the transplant unit at Vanderbilt University, and had never done anything in politics before, and used that as one of his strengths. His ads said, Sasser's a politician, I'm not.
Bill Frist has worked the last 18 years as a heart surgeon, living with people's hopes and fears and earning their trust. Bill Frist has seen the horrors of crime and drugs and families trapped by welfare. Tax and spend career politicians in Congress are crippling our country. That's why Bill Frist is running for the U.S. Senate to retire Jim Sasser. Bill Frist will put you first.
Sasser said when I talked to him, usually the challenger has to show why he should get your job. This year it seems as if we have to show why he shouldn't, and apparently he failed to do that. In Missouri, the challenge of Democratic Congressman Alan Wheat has failed. The new senator will be a Republican, like the retiring senator, John Danforth. The new one is John Ashcroft, a former governor. Oddly enough, Ashcroft at one point wanted to be Republican national chairman, the job Haley Barbour has now. He ran against Barbour and lost. He will now have to settle for being a U.S. senator, which he may think is better, which he may think is worse. And finally, one more note about Virginia. We could take a look at the raw vote there. That's still coming in, of course. But as you can see, with 31% of the precincts reporting, Rob has a narrow lead. That doesn't really mean very much. There are a lot more precincts to come, and without knowing exactly where those votes are coming from, it's hard to tell what the numbers mean. Rob, we do know, is running well where he was expected to in the Washington suburbs. And around Norfolk, Rob is running well where he was expected to in the Richmond area and in the western part of the state. That one remains just too close to call. Now, back to the national desk. That's the balance of power. That's where we started. 56 Democrats in the Senate to 44 Republicans. Here's what's happened so far. The Republicans have gained 5 seats. The Democrats obviously have lost 5. 21 are undecided. If the Democrats lose 2 more, if the Republicans gain 2 more, they'll be in control. Now, back to the national desk.
Thank you, Bruce. And on a night when so many Republicans should be singing happy days are here again, one Republican who worked for Democrats, David Gergen, is not singing. He's very unhappy. President Clinton's former image fixer who went to the State Department is leaving. Let's get the latest from our senior White House correspondent, Wolf Blitzer.
Well, Bernie, we've known now for several days that David Gergen was going to retire, was going to leave the Clinton administration and go teach at Duke University in North Carolina. Today, the White House has released the exchange of letters between Mr. Gergen and President Clinton. In Mr. Gergen's letter, he writes to the president that he is very disappointed in the lack of bipartisanship that developed over this past year. There were a few examples of good bipartisan cooperation, especially involving NAFTA. But on the whole, Mr. Gergen writes that many other times the acrimony and anger have reached what he describes as new lows in Washington. I know how much those times have pained you, he writes to the president. And indeed, in the president's reply to Mr. Clinton, the president does say that his appointment of Gergen was a powerful signal that he did want to have bipartisan cooperation. David Gergen, having served in several Republican administrations, he laments the fact that there was not enough bipartisanship. Indeed, as we go ahead into this post-election analysis, there's no doubt that White House officials now seem resigned to losing the U.S. Senate, that the Republicans almost certainly will gain the 7 seats necessary to have a majority in the U.S. Senate. If you speak to White House officials privately, as I have been throughout the course of the last couple hours, the only question now remains whether they'll lose the House of Representatives as well. Now back to the national desk.
Okay, thanks very much, Wolf Blitzer. A reminder to you, our viewers, throughout our coverage tonight, at the bottom of your screen, there you see it, the 4th Congressional District in Kentucky. We'll be showing you those kinds of races throughout this night. Now, let's take a look at some of the vote totals as they've come in Florida in the gubernatorial race. Bill Schneider, Jeb Bush still slightly leading, only with 7% of the precincts in.
That's right. This is going to be a very tight race. It could take us very late into the night.
Another race the Democrats are keeping a close eye on in New Jersey, the Senate race. The incumbent Senator Lautenberg is running ahead, but it's only 9% counted at this point.
Yes, Lautenberg is seeking his 3rd term. He was thought of as a fairly safe incumbent. He voted against the Clinton budget, for instance, but that's a state that's very sensitive to the tax issue.
Let's take a look at the matchups. In Michigan, the former head of the Republican Party there, Spence Abraham, going against Bob Carr.
That is a tight race. It's an open seat being given up by Don Riegel, a Democratic senator. It would be a Republican pickup if Abraham wins. Carr has been on the defensive in this because he's been depicted by Abraham as a Washington insider.
These states are among the ones where the polls have closed at 8 o'clock Eastern. The Pennsylvania Senate race is one of the close ones we're watching. Incumbent Harris Wofford is being chased by the Republican Rick Santorum.
Wofford, you remember, won a dramatic special election victory in 1991 on the health care issue, beat Attorney General Dick Thornburg. That Attorney General Dick Thornburg that presaged the Clinton victory in 92. Rick Santorum, a controversial candidate, very conservative from Pennsylvania.
So much blood on the floor in this Texas governor's race. Ann Richards trying to hold off a challenge from Republican George W. Bush.
And this is an odd race because Ann Richards is a very popular governor. She's very well liked, but there's been such a Republican surge in Texas that the Republicans seem to be coming to the polls to vote not necessarily against Ann Richards, but maybe against Bill Clinton.
Bill, the fact that the polls have closed doesn't mean we're going to get results in these races right away. I mean,
no, they're just starting to count the votes. They have different mechanisms for counting them, and some of them are going to be so close that we won't be able to call them for quite a while.
Sometimes we can incorporate the exit poll information we have, but until we have the raw vote count, yes, we can't completely call them.
That's right. We know Ann Richards is in a struggle, but we don't know how this race is going to turn out.
Ted Kennedy has always read a certain Hotel's ballroom on election night. He's rented the ballroom again. Candy Crowley is up in Massachusetts, and she has a guest. Candy?
Bernie, we are indeed in what serves as the headquarters for Senator Kennedy on every election night. That because this is a union hotel. The noise you are hearing is because they have CNN on, and therefore you're hearing me in all over this room. In any case, Senator Ted Kennedy has been declared the winner by CNN, and we brought in some of the family, and there are a lot of them in Massachusetts. Congressman Joe Kennedy. You didn't even have a race, you're telling me this time, because you didn't have an opponent. So react to me about your uncle's win.
Well, obviously, I think it was a really important win for Senator Kennedy. This is a race where Mitt Romney ran a really energetic and enthusiastic campaign. Came at Petty very, very hard. But I think Senator Kennedy, particularly in the debates, Kennedy, showed the kind of spirit that he still has and the fight that he wants to continue in the Senate of the United States on behalf of working people and the middle class of this country.
This is the closest race he's had in more than 3 decades. Why?
Well, I think that if you just look across the country, you'd see Democrat after Democrat, at least according to the projections, in very serious shape, particularly in the United States Senate. I think Teddy stands out as a bright and shining star when you look across the country at the kind of numbers that he's been able to project here, particularly in a small state like Massachusetts, where over $11 million has been spent against him. So I think, in fact, this is a very important and significant victory for Ted Kennedy, and I think that he will go into the Senate this year really with a great deal of renewed energy to take on the fight, because so often the voices of the poor and the senior citizens and others in this country are ignored in Washington, and Teddy will be there for them.
Okay, thanks so much, Congressman Joe Kennedy.
Thank
a winner
you.
Tonight, as well as his uncle, Senator Ted Kennedy. Back to the national desk.
Okay, thanks very much.
And we're ready to declare a winner in the Vermont senator's race, and here it is. We're seeing it as you do. Jim Jeffords, the Republican incumbent. Bill Schneider.
Well, Jim Jeffords, people thought might be in trouble. Jan Backus, his Democratic opponent, did something very un-Vermont. She ran negative ads against him. The race was closing up, but it looks like he survived.
Results continue pouring in at the bottom of your screen. We'll continue to report to you on this election night, and we'll be back in a moment.
Polls closed in the state of Virginia an hour and a half ago, but there is one very hot Senate race in that state that we are keeping a close eye on at this hour. As you can see, with 46% of the vote counted, Senator Robb, the incumbent Democrat, 46%, to Oliver North, 42%, the independent Marshall Coleman, 11%. We're watching those numbers. Claire Shipman is at Robb headquarters in Richmond, I believe. Claire, or in Vienna, Virginia, I should say. And Claire, you got someone you're talking to there.
Yeah, actually, we're in Tyson's Corner, and people are very excited here. As you mentioned, it does appear that Robb has the lead at this point. With us now is one of his main supporters, former Governor Doug Wilder. Governor Wilder, how are you feeling at this point? Are you optimistic about the numbers?
I am. I felt all along it would be a closely contested race. I felt all along that Robb would win it, could win it, and in fact, I think he will win it. The important thing is that the people of Virginia turned out in such large numbers to show that they were concerned as to who their representative would be. I think this will help Chuck Robb in terms of being a better United States Senator. And I think to the extent that he reached out to all Virginians, showed that we weren't going to turn the clock back. To the extent that this sets us apart again from the rest of the country. It says that Virginians are unique.
Now, how important do you think your support was, and do you think it would have helped if you jumped in a little bit sooner?
Well, I think the fact that I jumped in might have helped. I think also the credit should go to those people who felt that they wanted to see us together, those people who felt that we shouldn't fight. And I can tell you quite frankly, I didn't think that he could win if I stayed in the race. I knew that I couldn't win if he stayed in the race. He had the money, I didn't. And I said it's a time for us to put aside whatever personal differences we have and unite for the betterment of Virginia and the people of Virginia. So the credit goes to them. And hopefully this trend continues, and hopefully he'll win.
Now, as you know, this has been a particularly mean race and a season of mean races. Do you think, whomever the victor, do you think that it will be easy for Virginia to get over this sort of nasty race?
It doesn't heal right away, but I think you'll see that people understand what ingredients are necessary to win. You don't write off any group, nor do you take any group for granted. And for so long, the Republicans have not tried to reach out and bring in all elements. And I've said that on so many occasions. And on so many occasions also, Democrats take certain votes for granted. I think Chuck Robb didn't do that this time. I think the Republicans continued doing what they did, saying it wasn't even cost effective to campaign. We paid a price for that last year here in Virginia, and that wasn't repeated this time, and it resulted in victory.
How would you characterize this race's importance in terms of the country and the Senate?
It shows you what can happen. Robb was on the most endangered species list. No one gave him a chance. People said he couldn't win and wouldn't win. And it looks now that he might be one of those few people that would survive when others supposedly had safe seats. It shows you that in politics, nothing is certain and nothing is predictable. And the more things change, the more they remain the same. People are in charge, and I love it.
Governor Wilder, thank you very much. Now back to the national desk.
When we come back, we'll take you to the Senate races and the governor's races and tell you how they all stack up at this hour.
Defeating the Republican Sheffield Nelson. Bill?
Governor Tucker has ethics problems because of his ties to Whitewater and some small business administration loans. Nelson, his opponent, is a die-hard Clinton enemy. He ran against Governor Clinton in 1990. Tucker has pulled it out.
Welcome to our coverage. I'm Bernard Shaw, along with Judy Woodruff and Bill Schneider. Let's go to Bruce Morton to find out what it looks like in terms of the Democrats in the Senate and who is going to or who will control the United States Senate. Bruce?
Bernie, we might begin by taking a look at where we started. There are 100 senators, of course, and when this day dawned, 56 of them were Democrats, 44 of them were Republicans. Now, we have some races decided, some still in play, but here's where we are at the moment. The Republicans have gained 5 seats. There are 20 still undecided. If they gain 2 more, if they get up to 7, then they'll control the Senate. Now back to the national desk.
Bill Schneider, those numbers are very encouraging for the Republicans.
They certainly are, and the Democrats have not managed to capture a single seat formerly held by the Republicans. So that is the full change has been 5 seats shifting from Democratic to Republican.
And I could just hear the wheels going around in the heads of the present chairman of the important committees in the Senate. Imagine Robert Byrd of West Virginia. He would be out as chairman of the Appropriations Committee. Joseph Biden would leave. Orrin Hatch, the Republican, would take over as Senate Judiciary Committee chairman. Edward Kennedy, whom we just reported won in Massachusetts, he would lose his job as chairman of Labor and Human Resources. Look at Pat Moynihan, Finance. Bob Packwood would take over there. Jesse Helms could become the next chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Alphonse D'Amato, banking. Right. And Sam Nunn would be gone, and guess who would be in if the Republicans get 2 more seats? Strom Thurmond, South Carolina.
And Armed Services Committee.
That's right. The Democrats made up a poster of Al D'Amato, Jesse Helms, Bob Dole, and said, this is what will happen if the Republicans take over the Senate. It could happen.
Another set of races that both sides are keeping a very close eye on tonight are those governor's races. Going into tonight, 36 governors were up. 21 of them were Democrats, 14 were Republicans, 1 was an independent. We're going to go now to our governor's desk and to CNN's Jean Meserve, who's been keeping an eye on how that stacks up. Jean.
Well, it's looking good for the Republicans right now. If we look at those balance of power numbers, we had 29 Democrats and 20 Republicans in office when this day began, and we have some races already called right now, including those holdovers. We have 12 Republicans and 10 Democrats. That's a net increase of 2 for the Republicans. 28 races are still undecided. 15 races were rated a toss-up when this day began. Back to the national desk.
Okay, thanks very much. Gene Meserve.
All right, and now to the Cuomo headquarters. CNN's Jeannie Most is there, and I think she's going to speak to Matilda Cuomo. Is that right?
That's right. The governor himself is upstairs here at the hotel. He'll be watching the returns on television, but we're here with Matilda Cuomo, the wife of the governor for how many years?
Well, 40 years, going on 41 now, actually.
So, what's it feel like? I mean...
And you notice that I haven't changed him, even though he says, 12 years, don't worry about it. Look at Matilda. She's with me 40 years.
It's a tight race. I mean, this is supposed to be a real squeaker. How are you feeling about this now? I mean...
I think there were a lot of things to
We're going to interrupt this interview and come back to Mrs. Cuomo to say we are ready to declare a winner in the Virginia Senate race. He is the incumbent, Chuck Robb, a big victory for the Democrats over the Republican Oliver North. Bill
and
Schroeder.
a sweet victory for the Democrats because Oliver North was the most controversial candidate. This was the hottest race in the country. Would Virginia voters send Oliver North to the United States Senate? He had a lot of support from conservative activists, Christian conservatives, but it looked like he had just as many enemies. Robb has made it.
We should be careful of the words we utter. This morning, as he came out of the polling booth, Oliver North said that President Clinton would have
Excedrin headache.
Number 10. And on Inside Politics, when we talked to George Stephanopoulos, I said, what do you think about North's comment? Stephanopoulos said, Oliver North will have Excedrin headache number 12.
So now we know who's going to have the headache.
Yeah. This is a very good night for Republicans generally, but this is a very bitter pill for them to swallow, the loss of Virginia.
Speaking of pills, now we want to go back to Jeannie Most and her interview with the First Lady of the state of New York, Matilda Cuomo. Back to you, Jeannie.
Okay, and you heard that news. Oliver North was defeated, so...
Very exciting, and I'm so happy. That's a good omen. That's good.
So, in your race, it's a squeaker. Are you folks nervous or what? How's the governor feeling?
No, we're optimistic because I think it boils down to what's best for me, my family, the children of the future. And this is a governor who has great leadership, I tell you. I mean, he has, when we talk about integrity, we use these words. I mean, he really has integrity. And he doesn't say things simplistically or to make them sound good because you want to hear it that way, but it's misleading. It's deceptive. He wouldn't do that. And I think, he also has led this state that is a he's made a national impact on the whole country because most of our state programs and services under the Decade of the Child, which also, as a governor, I'm so proud of him. No other governor has started anything like this.
You sort of made some news yourself during this campaign. I mean, you called Mr. Pataki, the main opponent of the governor, you called him a lightweight. You said he was tin compared to your husband's gold. I mean, did you really say those things?
In fact, knowledge is power, and if people were to really consider the facts, they would realize that there is no comparison. This governor has a really solid record and a sense of accomplishments that he has that you can't take away from the governor. And we're going to build on those accomplishments and the continuity that we will have to do more and better things for our families and children. Because you can't compare this state with Utah or Nebraska or Connecticut. We have a lot of complex problems here. We have people who speak 178 languages, and so we're larger than countries.
Can I ask, are you sorry, and is he sorry he didn't run for president?
Well, that's behind us. I'm telling you, we're looking ahead. But the fact is he opted to stay here for another 4 years and build on his accomplishments and really lead us into some real good quality of life. Actually, you look at his record, you look at the other fellows' records now that you mentioned what I said. It's for good reason because I'm telling the people who haven't voted yet, they have a little more time to vote. Please vote.
Thank you very much, and we should say the polls in New York are still open another 20 minutes.
That's right.
That's it from here, back to the national desk.
And until they close, we can't talk about exit polls from New York. But you have an observation about these Senate races.
Well, there have been 5 Senate seats that have changed hands, all from Democratic to Republican, but 4 of those seats were open races in which no incumbent was running. Only one incumbent was defeated for the United States Senate. That was Democrat Jim Sasser. He was from Tennessee, where there was also an open race on the ballot at the same time. In the 2 races that have changed hands for governors, where seats have gone from Democratic to Republican, they were both open seats. So it looks like the Republicans are making gains, but so far almost all of their gains, except for Sasser, have been in open races where no incumbent was running.
Yeah.
All right.
I would just quickly add, you can imagine Vice President Al Gore very depressed to see his old seat go over to the Republican side.
2 Republicans in Tennessee now.
That's right, a shutout for the Democrats. A lot of polls have closed. In more than half the states, the polls have closed. We've got a lot of votes to count, a lot of exit polls to examine. We're going to continue to do that when we come right back. just about 8 minutes ago that CNN declared the incumbent Democratic Senator of Virginia, Chuck Robb, the winner in his state, defeating Oliver North, the Republican challenger. We have 2 live reports. First, we want to go to North headquarters and to CNN's Gene Randall. Gene?
Judy, I don't think you'll find too many of Oliver North's supporters in this room at the Richmond Center ready to concede that North has lost his bitter campaign for the U.S. Senate against the incumbent Charles Robb. At the same time, it is a very subdued crowd, despite the music you might hear in the background. This crowd has been watching a number of monitors all night long, and with each new projection that Chuck Robb was the winner, the crowd got quieter. There were several hints during the day of anxiety inside the North camp. Examples. When the turnout was very heavy in Richmond, I was told earlier today that is not good news for Oliver North. We were also told we would not see the candidate until he was either ready to accept or make a victory statement or to accept the fact that he had lost and make a concession statement. Now it appears if the projections are correct, he'll be doing the latter, although not just yet. Let's go to Claire Schiffman at Robb headquarters in Northern Virginia. Claire?
Well, there's been a lot of excitement here in the room over the last 10 or 15 minutes, a lot of different television reports that Robb has won the race. People have been cheering. Robb is not expected here for about another 45 minutes, and his supporters are still trickling in. Really, I don't think anybody expected it to be announced so early. A couple of hours ago, they were saying they expected to be here until late in the night waiting for the results, talking about maybe a 2% margin. So this was really something of a surprise. And again, quite a bit of excitement here, but not all of the supporters are here yet. Still a fairly small crowd. I'm Claire Shipman reporting live from the Ritz-Carlton in Virginia.
Well, it sounds like some people are still shell-shocked at respective headquarters, but exit polling is telling us a lot about why people voted the way they voted and who.
Yes, what happened in Virginia, apparently, from the exit poll, is that the moderate vote in Virginia went for Chuck Robb by 2-1. Oliver North did not come across as much of a moderate. They hold the balance of power in most states, and they went heavily for the incumbent Chuck Robb. And we also found in the exit poll that the black vote in Virginia was overwhelmingly for the Democrat Chuck Robb, and it counterbalanced the very heavy turnout among Christian conservative voters who went just as heavily for the Republican Oliver North.
We have so utterly much to report to you tonight. We're going to continue doing it when we come back, and when we come back, we're going to hear from the Capitol gang.
Welcome to Washington. I'm Al Hunt, and we're the Capitol Gang. My colleague, Robert Novak, probably more than anyone, you have been calling this tidal wave now for weeks. You have ridden it, and you are now reveling in it, huh?
We're in the tidal wave, but there's even some joy for the Democrats because they apparently have knocked off Ollie North in Virginia. And, you know, that even brings some joy to Republicans. A lot of Republicans have said, we'd love to get the Senate.
We'll come back to them in a minute. We have a result. We have a winner, that is, in the Tennessee governor's race, where Republican Don Sundquist was running. Here he is. We're declaring him the winner. This is an open seat, and it is a pickup for the Republicans, defeating the mayor of Nashville, John Bredeson.
Yes, in many ways, this was a race between the Memphis area representative and Bredeson, the Nashville mayor. The Republican who won was campaigning against the state income tax. A bitter defeat for Al Gore. He's seen the state of Tennessee elect 2 Republican senators and a Republican governor tonight.
A sweep.
Bob Novak, we caught you with your mouth open. We're sorry, we had breaking news. Back to the Capitol gang in Washington.
Well, I was talking about the Senate, Bernie, because the definitive moment of the evening was when 2 Republicans were elected to the Senate tonight from Tennessee. And the most amazing thing is Dr. Frist beating Jim Sasser, who was about to become the majority leader of the Senate, Democratic leader of the Senate. Jim Sasser, a liberal, labor lawyer, respected senator. That kind of democracy, that kind of Democratic senator in the South is finished now.
Well, that kind of senator is not finished in New England, however, because one of the real old war horses, maybe the biggest of all, Edward M. Kennedy, 3 weeks ago, they said he's in deep trouble. One big, Margaret.
One old whale survived. You know, if Kennedy had been 20 pounds lighter and 20 years younger, Romney would have never moved ahead in this race, because at the beginning, that's all he had. He simply said, this guy is too old, let's get rid of him. But when Kennedy got back and started campaigning, he quickly closed in on him. And the ads showing Romney's business record, where they went to the plant and had all these people saying, he came in, he bought the plant, he took away our health insurance, he took away our pensions. This really turned the tide for Kennedy in Massachusetts. Also, it's one of the few places where Clinton is popular.
Mona, the slowest results to come in, of course, are the House races. It may be the most important election of the evening. The early returns, however, though, are really encouraging for the Republicans.
Yes. So far, there are results coming in from Kentucky, from Georgia, and it's looking very good for the Republicans. And Indiana, also, three races picked up in Indiana. Look, the tide is going in the direction of Republican incumbents. The notion that this is an anti-incumbent fever is wrong. It's an anti-Democrat fever, anti-liberal Democrats especially, though there are some moderate Democrats who unfortunately are going to be swamped in this wave. But if you look at the mood of the evening, you see that those people who are in trouble are liberal Democrats, and I would argue that the meaning of this election, even though we haven't yet seen all the election results, is that the liberal elite are being ousted. It's not clear what they're being replaced with yet.
It pains me to say it, but I agree with her. It's hard. I think if you're a liberal Democrat, if you're sitting in the White House, Margaret, it must be impossible to come up with any kind of real rationalization. It's just a stinging defeat.
And you know, the Jill Long, Congresswoman Jill Long, who was elected to fill the seat of Danny Quayle in Indiana originally in a big upset. That her defeat, I think, everybody was watching that as the barometer race in the country. Indiana counts their ballots very fast. Everybody said if Jill Long survives, the Republicans won't carry the House. If Jill Long is defeated, they have a very good chance to carry the House.
And Bob, you said earlier that Sasser was on his way to becoming majority leader. I think we all have
Democratic
to change
leader.
I
changed that.
That's right.
Yes.
We got to change our nomenclature.
Even you didn't know how big that wave was.
The other thing, there's still some big governors races that we don't know the outcome. Very close. Georgia and Florida, the polls have closed, but the races are too close to call as of now. Margaret, that'll be crucial whether the Democrats can hold on to any of those big governorships.
Right, and it looks like they won't. I mean, in a lot of places, I mean, Republicans will definitely win. The Florida and Texas, the Bush boys were dead even with Childs and Richards. I think Childs... No?
No, the only place where they've counted ballots so far is in Florida, not in Texas.
And it's a very close race.
In Florida, it's virtually a dead heat. Childs looks to be a little bit ahead, but the general feeling I get called from Texas is that George W. Bush is going to win that.
Let me see if I can get a consensus, Mona, that this was basically a rejection of liberal Democrats as opposed to an affirmation or a vote for any kind of Republican or
well, I think it puts the Republicans in a position where the electorate is saying to them, show us. You know, we are giving you an opportunity now to show what you're made of. I think the contract with America helped. I think that the Republican Party is now in a position where, yes, I think it nationalized this race, and it showed the Republican Party had a program for the future.
And this was a race full of issues. Everybody said there's no issues in this race. It was just dirt. My goodness, if I ever saw a big government against little government, that's what this race was. The other thing is this election really shows that the regionalization of politics, the solid South is now the Republican South. Right. This would not be such a bad election for the Democrats if it were not for the devastating defeats they're taking in their former heartland of the South. For the Democrats if it were not for the devastating defeats they're taking in their former heartland of the South.
The contract for the future really was to go back to 1981, wasn't it?
Right. I mean, I think the Republicans are winning despite the contract with America, not because of it. I think it'll be interesting to see tomorrow what Clinton says in his statement, how he deals with this. If he takes part of the blame himself, I think it will really help rather than blaming it on the congressional Democrats.
But I can see the revisionist history has begun already this week. The revisionist version of this election is going to go like this, that it was not a victory for Republicans, it was not a victory for conservative ideas, that it was all dirty politics and negative campaigning. And that's not true. If you look at the races, there were just as many dirty ads that were run against Republicans as against Democrats.
I think that would be a mistake.
You're the embodiment of the liberal mind, because I tell you why.
And the liberal body. Mind
I don't want
body.
to get into that. because
it's a family hour.
Yes, because when you talk about the attack on the contract with America being a success, it wasn't a success, it failed, but you say, gee, it sounded so good, it made us feel so good, we should have done it, but it didn't work for the Democrats when they trashed the contract, which included things people like. the line item veto, the balanced budget amendment, term limits.
But when it was pointed out what they'd have to do to balance the budget, I think that was a lot of guesswork.
But Margaret, didn't work.
Of course, the problem is it didn't add up. But I want to tell you, Mona, I agree with you. The Democrats were just as irresponsible as the Republicans in an awful lot of these races. This is Al Hunt saying that we will be back in 2 hours to shed some more heat, maybe a little bit of light. And now back to Bernie and Judy.
Thank you, Al. Always light. I almost said heat. We'll have the latest on the races and Larry King live with some guests right after this local cable break.
Welcome to a special edition of Larry King Live. In just a moment, the heads of the Republican and Democratic parties, Haley Barbour and David Wilhelm, will be joining me. But first, an election night update out of Atlanta.
In New Mexico, CNN declares a winner. Incumbent Jeff Bingaman, the Republican, going back to Washington.
In Wyoming, a Senate seat that was open, the Republican is the winner, Craig Thomas.
In New York, no surprise here, Democratic incumbent Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the winner.
And here's how the Senate stacks up at this hour. We're calling it the Senate scorecard going into tonight. 56 Democrats, 44 Republicans. At this hour, 13 still undecided. 44 Republicans, 43 Democrats. The Republicans continue to collect those wins. Now, Bill Schneider, what do you make of this Bingaman win in New Mexico and the Republican hanging on to the Wyoming Senate seat?
Well, no big surprises there. The war in the West is an issue in a lot of the western states, and it was thought that Bingaman might be on the defensive because of it. He's an incumbent. He won, and the Republicans held the open seat in Wyoming. You know, there have been 5 turnovers. 4 have been in open seats held by Democrats. Only 1 incumbent has been defeated, Jim Sasser. I wonder if he would have been defeated if he didn't also have an open seat in Tennessee. Now, the Republicans have picked up 5 Senate seats. They need 2 more. There are 2 more open Democratic seats that are still in play. One is in Michigan, the other is in Arizona. If those 2 seats go Republican, as other open seats have, that would give the Republicans a majority.
CNN is ready to declare a winner in that New Jersey Senate race. Frank Lautenberg, the incumbent, will go back to Washington.
And governor's race in the state of New York. We're still counting those votes. Mario Cuomo, the Democratic incumbent, holding on at this hour. Bill.
This is an important state. Mario Cuomo is fighting for his life, his 4th consecutive term in New York. He wants to beat the record of Nelson Rockefeller, who didn't quite make it through all 4 terms.
CNN is ready to declare a winner in Nebraska's race. Not a winner, but you can see that Bob Kerrey, the 51-year-old incumbent, the veteran, the winner of the Congressional Medal of Honor, and Jane Stoney, the Republican challenger from Omaha, a retired phone company executive.
Bob Kerrey, he's favored to win this race. He's not very close to President Clinton, and that may be helping him in Nebraska.
And in the state of Minnesota, a place that Democrats and Republicans have a close eye, we're still counting the votes. Ann Winia, the Democrat, is running against the Republican Rod Grams. There is an independent candidate in this race who is a factor, Bill.
That's right. This is one of the most polarized state races in the country. Grams is a strong conservative. Winia is the House Majority Leader. She is a very ardent liberal. And the Democrats are hoping to win this seat from the Republicans. That would be the first time this evening that happens.
In Colorado, CNN declares incumbent Governor Roy Romer has been reelected tonight.
And that's a victory also for Ross Perot. Roy Romer was one of the Democrats whom Perot endorsed for reelection.
And we're ready to declare a winner in the Minnesota governor's race. Arnie Carlson, the incumbent Republican. Not really a surprise, Bill Schneider.
Not a surprise. His problem was biggest in the primary, where he had to win a primary against Alan Quist, who was the endorsed candidate by the convention that was controlled by Christian conservatives. He defeated him in the primary, and from then on, he looked like he was safe.
Well, those governors, they're stacking up.
Yes, they are.
They're stacking them up. We now, I haven't counted it. We had 26 states an hour ago, and now I think we must be up to well over 35 or so.
Bill, let's mull over these exit polls. And we should tell you, if you're just joining CNN, we declared that Oliver North did not knock off Chuck Robb, the incumbent Senate Democrat. Chuck Robb will be going back to Washington. So far, no official comment one way or the other from either the challenger or the incumbent.
That's right. What about those exit polls, Bill? What are we seeing in the races that we've been able to tally at this hour?
Well, let's take a look at the Virginia race, the hottest race of this season, where we see moderates. Among moderate voters, Chuck Robb beat Oliver North 2-1. That's a very big swing, especially for an incumbent. Now, was Iran-Contra a factor in your Senate vote? 60% said yes, it was. What about Senator Robb's personal life? That was the issue that North used against him. Only 40% thought that was a serious issue. So clearly North's negatives were more serious. Among voters who said the top issue was honesty and ethics. Now here is a surprise. Robb beat North by over 3-1. Clearly, honesty and ethics was a more serious problem for Oliver North among Virginia voters than among Senator Robb.
All right, in Wyoming, CNN is ready to declare a winner in that gubernatorial race.
We're waiting to see who it is.
This is a pickup, Bill and Judy. Jim Geringer, the Republican.
That's right. In that race, the incumbent Sullivan, the Democrat, is running for the Senate, and he lost that Senate race.
In the state of Arizona, we're still counting votes in that governor's race between Fife Symington, the incumbent Republican, the Democrat, Mr. Basha, and the independent, Mr. Buttrick. A close race.
Symington is one of the only two Republican incumbent governors who may be in some trouble because he had some savings and loan problems. Eddie Basha is a chain store owner and a non-politician who's running a very strong race out there.
Thanks for correcting the pronunciation.
The polls have just closed in Arizona. We want to show you the matchup in the United States Senate. Sam Coppersmith is being challenged by John Kyle, a U.S. congressman. And as I say, the polls just closed in this, and it's too soon to tell you who's going to come out on top.
But this is an open seat, and this is one of the ones the Republicans are counting on to put them over the top. This is the seat being given up by Dennis DeConcini, a Democrat. If it goes Republican, that would be another Republican gain towards their goal of 7.
In the state of New Hampshire, we're ready to declare a winner. The Republicans are holding on to the state house. Governor Steve Merrill holds on. He is the Republican, and he is going to remain in office.
No surprise there. He's running. This is one of the few states that has a 2-year term. He's running for another 2-year term. Remember that name, Steve Merrill. He could be very, very important. New Hampshire, Republican contest for the presidency. What Steve Merrill does 2 years from now could make a lot of difference in whom the Republicans nominate.
In that tight Florida gubernatorial race, this is the raw vote picture at 7 minutes past 9 Eastern Time. We're not ready to declare a winner in this race, but you can see Jeb Bush is leading incumbent Lawton Chiles 51% to 49%, with only 23% of the precincts reporting.
Bill, well, let's move on to the other Bush brother, and that is George W. Bush in Texas. Challenging the incumbent Democrat Ann Richards at this hour with only 7% of the vote reporting. George W. Bush is ahead. Bill?
Both of the Bush brothers are running very strong in those states. You know, in many ways, those states have seen a Republican surge because Clinton is very unpopular in those 2 states. And one way to show your opposition to Clinton is to vote for someone named Bush.
I just wanted to say very quickly before we go back to Larry King Live, you talked about this being the first time 2 Republican senators from Tennessee have existed there since 1976 when Howard Baker and Bill Brock held the seats. Ironically, Sasser defeated Brock that year. Tonight, Paul Sarbanes, the incumbent Democrat in Maryland, defeated Bill Brock, who was challenging him for that seat.
That's right. Brock wanted to be one of the only 2 men in American history to be senator from 2 different states.
Larry King Live with guests in Washington. Larry, an interesting night.
You betcha, Bernie, and the guests are right on top of things. They've got information I don't think we have yet. David Wilhelm is chairman of the Democratic National Committee. Haley Barbour, chairman of the Republican National Committee. First spin.
First spin. The American people in 1992 voted for change. In 1994, they're voting for change again. They're frustrated with the pace of change. And one way or the other, together, we've got to deliver the change the American people want. And I think that's the message tonight.
What's the message?
Bill Clinton said, if you like the direction I'm taking the country,
you need to vote for the Democrats. And we said we thought the country wasn't going in the right direction. And I think what the American people did tonight was they rejected Clinton's policies, and they embraced Republican ideas that government ought to be smaller, not larger, taxes ought to be lower, not higher, and we ought to rely more on individual freedom and personal responsibility instead of government power and government responsibility.
And I would say this, people are frustrated with the pace of change, but we have begun to change. Government is smaller.
To change.
Well, I'm afraid that it is. I think, ironically, people have voted for the very party tonight that has frustrated change at every step of the way. The Republicans had a very clear strategy. They've been extraordinarily disciplined, and I'd say extraordinarily cynical over the past 20 months. They keep stopping everything, believing that this party would wear the jacket.
Senator Dole said here Friday night that when the GOP takes control of the Senate, by the way, will they tonight take control of the Senate?
It appears so, Larry. I mean, I don't count my chickens till they hatch.
Yeah, I'm not going to concede anything as long as there are polls open, so people out there on the West Coast turn it all around.
Senator Dole said he will call President Clinton tonight, meet with him at his earliest convenience, and begin a bipartisan approach to the next 2 years. And he expected Newt Gingrich, whether he is House Majority Leader or Minority Leader, to do the same. Do you?
I do, and I hope President Clinton will accept the verdict of the American people. I mean, this has been a very clear choice. When Republicans issued their contract with America and said, look, here's what we want to do, we could have just run against Clinton. We could have just said, Clinton's bad, he's terrible, throw him out. But instead we said, if you elect us, here's what we want to do. We want to offer you a different agenda, an agenda of smaller government and lower taxes. And people have rendered their verdict tonight. And I hope President Clinton's response will be to say, hey, people have spoken. They want to go in a different direction. I'm going to work with the Republicans. The Republicans are ready to work with him. We worked with him on NAFTA, and we're ready to work with any Democrat. Lots of Democrats agree with us.
Let me get a break, and we'll come right back with David Wilhelm and Haley Barbour. They're our guests for the full hour on this special edition of Larry King Live on election night. Don't go away. We will be including your phone calls. Our party chairman will be with us for the full hour, and on the bottom of the screen, results as they come in. Already have won tonight. Senator Ted Kennedy, Jeff Bingaman wins in New Mexico, Chuck Robb wins in Virginia. Our guest are the two-party chairman. Biggest surprise so far, Haley?
Well, I think the biggest surprise is if the Republicans sweep everything in Tennessee. That is an incredible turnaround to win a governorship and 2 Senate races that were all Democrats going in.
We've called a sweep in Tennessee. We've called a You don't call that yet? You don't see it from your...
I haven't seen the return.
CNN has called it a sweep. They came in with a Tennessee governorship.
To win a sweep in Tennessee is a huge
your biggest surprise.
Well, I'm glad to see Chuck Robb apparently win the Virginia race. Yeah, because Ollie North a week ago looked like a winner. I think the National Republicans thought he was a winner. That race was turned around in the last week, and Chuck Robb's victory tonight is good news for the Democrats.
I was going to say, if Robb in fact has won, it would be a turnaround in the last few days, and probably means a very, very large turnout in the state.
Yeah, there was a big turnout in Richmond. They said that was in trouble.
There must have been a large turnout in Northern Virginia.
I think there was a large turnout in Northern Virginia.
With Sasser's defeat, who'll be the minority leader if the Republicans take control?
Well, I don't know. I can't speak for the Senate Democrats. Obviously, before tonight, Senator Sasser and Senator Daschle were waging a very competitive battle for Senate Majority Leader. I would guess that Tom Daschle has the edge in a race for Minority Leader.
Now, I know you get your own figures and your own exit polls. What do you hear in Florida? We've got it neck and neck.
A very close race. Probably an advantage to Jeb Bush for 2 reasons. It looks like our turnout's a little bit better. Republicans were a lot more upbeat and optimistic, enthusiastic about this election. And the other things, there are over 200,000 absentee ballots cast in Florida. Typically, they favor the Republicans by 3-2 or better margin. Connie Mack, you might remember, lost on Election Day and won in absentee ballots.
Do you think we might have to wait for absentees in Florida?
We might. It might be that close.
So, a very, very tight race. Again, a race where Jeb Bush was ahead 2 weeks ago. Lawton Childs has battled back. One of Jeb Bush's ads blew up on him. It's going to be a very, very close race. And we very well may need
Now, when we had up on the screen George W. Bush Jr. 14 percentage points ahead in Texas, both of you said that that's Too early figuring
It's
that.
too early.
Don't get
You don't know where the votes are from. You don't know where the votes are from. Where are they from? Are they from South Texas or not? They're probably not from South Texas. That race is going to tighten up over time.
The key here is where, like, if we see Wolford ahead in Pennsylvania, but all those are Philadelphia votes, then that's not surprising.
Right. That's exactly right. You have to know where they came from. George Bush is not going to beat Ann Richards by 14 points. I think he's going to beat her, but it's going to be a close race, and I'm sure if David thinks Ann's going to win, but it's going to be a close race.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing that always drives, I think, people like Haley and I crazy at this point in the evening. You don't know where the votes are. If it says 10% on the screen and you don't know where those votes are, you really don't know the outcome until you've got more votes counted.
Most people are surprised at how many races we're calling over already. And this is based on projections. We expected a long night. Is it going to be a long night, or maybe not a long night?
It's going to be a long night for a lot of races, Larry. I mean, the networks do these exit polls, and they are notoriously unreliable. But once you take the exit polls, see some returns, and see a national trend, then it makes some sense. But there are going to be some close races. There are going to be so many House races. You look
Where do you stand in the House now?
Well, it looks like from the early returns that we have won about every race that we hoped for, or 80% of what we hoped for. So we're going to make big gains. Whether it's going to be 40, it's going to be way up in the evening.
You're going to take the House.
We're going to win a lot. Whether we take the House, it'll be late in the evening before we know it.
I don't think the Republicans are going to take the House, but this is a perfect example of where voters are still voting.
We're going to take a break and go down to Atlanta. Here's Judy Woodruff. Judy?
Larry, we interrupt to bring you some results in a race that I know both of your guests are interested in the Senate race in the state of Michigan. We are prepared to declare a winner, and it is the Republican. This is a pickup for the Republican, Spencer Abraham, the winner. And Larry, back to you.
Larry,
we're back, and your reaction to that?
I was just going to say,
he ran against you.
David and I were just laughing. Two men who ran against me for national chairman, John Ashcroft and Spencer Abraham, both got elected United States Senator tonight. Aren't they lucky that I beat them? That's the way I tell it.
You took the outpost, and they got into the Senate.
That's right. They got the goodies.
We're going to take a break and come back with more. We'll be including your phone calls. This is Larry King Live, all part of our election night coverage on the best place to cover an election, CNN. Don't go away.
Grow stronger, America depends on its bounty, both natural and man-made. Finding new ways to get these goods to market more efficiently and reliably is the noble pursuit of Norfolk Southern, the thoroughbred of transportation.
In business, as in life, everybody's different. Different goals, different needs. The Principal Financial Group understands. We'll help you design a benefit plan as unique and individual as your company, customized to give you and your employees an advantage. That's the Principal Edge, providing pension and health benefits for more small businesses than any other life insurance company. So for benefits that fit your company to the letter, look for the Principal Edge.
The legendary watch dial, exhibited in distinguished museums around the world, is the design inspiration for the Movado Museum collection of watches. Movado.
Sure.
Since tonight, the insurance company. So for benefits
for the Movado Museum collection of watches. Movado, the museum watch.
Projections, winners, losers, we'll be with you. Is the biggest winner tonight, before we go to phone calls, right this minute, John Warner, if the Rob thing holds up?
Well, he's certainly one big winner. The Rob race he was a true profile and courage in that race. I'll say as a member of the other party, that was a tough thing to do. You rarely see it. And you see moderates in Virginia voting for Chuck Robb.
Warner going to lose any committeeships?
Oh, I don't know about that. I think the bigger problem for Senator Warner is if he seeks re-election, the problems he might have for the nomination.
Let's go to calls. Sulphur, Louisiana, with David Wilhelm and Haley Barbour, chairman of the parties. Hello.
Hello. I have a question for Mr. Wilhelm.
Sure.
Since tonight's election clearly shows Mr. Clinton may be vulnerable in the next election, do the Democrats plan to groom another person for president in 2 years?
I hear nothing like that, see nothing like that. I don't think that is likely to occur at all. I think what happened in this race, if I can take just a moment, people want change. We've turned a corner in this country. We've reduced the deficit. We've cut federal spending. We're creating jobs. But people don't see it yet in our everyday lives. And I think that's a very, very important point.
Are the people saying tonight, let's go back to Reaganomics?
I really don't think so. I think people are legitimately frustrated with the pace of change. If you're an average person, if you're a working middle-class person out there, you're not standing up today yet and saying, Eureka, the economy is great. You're not saying the crime rate is reduced yet. You're not saying, oh, it's easy for me to send kids to college. But after 12 years, we've made progress on every single point. Our frustration, I think, about this race is people didn't see it yet in their everyday lives, even though we had turned a corner in this country.
Isn't it true, Haley, that off years the other party usually wins?
It is, but not anything to this magnitude.
You'd have to go back a number of years.
In the midterm election after a new president's elected, the average loss is only 14 in the House and 1 in the Senate. Usually, if a president gets a second term, is when his party gets shellacked in the midterm elections.
I think your only fear might be a repeat of 46, 48. The Republicans take control, Truman runs against them and wins in 48 by blaming Congress. So you're going to have to show, as Dole said, some cooperation. You can't be a Ginners.
Well, it's more than that. The American people have rendered a verdict, and I know the Democrats resist it, but the American people have made plain what we've got to do is respond to what the American people voted for tonight. If we do our job, if we give them what they voted for, and don't resist what they've... You know, one problem that the Democrats have is they took their 43% of the vote in '92 as a mandate to go in a different direction from their campaign. What we've got to do is we got to perform on what we said in the campaign. If we do that, we'll be fine. If we don't do it, shame on us, kick us out.
And I would say this, for 21 months, we've cut the deficit. People want the deficit cut. We're doing it. We're working it. We need to continue to work together to do that. For 21 months, we've been creating jobs in this country. We need to continue doing that as well.
But the public is rejecting it tonight.
But I think it is really true that people haven't felt the positive effects of the change we brought about yet in our everyday lives.
With the results tonight?
Well, I certainly hope we don't. I certainly hope that the analysis of this is not a return to Reaganomics, the very policies that got us in the fix in the first place. I think what we need to do is move forward with changes that are going to benefit people in their everyday lives. That's what we need to do together.
Washington, D.C., hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Larry. Yes, I have a question for Mr. Barber. You claim that that the Democrats really haven't done anything that the American public wants, but the fact is that 4.2 million new jobs have been created since President Clinton took office.
Yeah, we know that. Do you have a question about the election?
The question is, what is your party plan to do that the president already...
Are you going to get more jobs?
Well, the American people think, and I'm not trying to spin you can look at the polls. The American people think this economy is improving in spite of the president's policies, not because of it. The American people think government is already too big for its britches, Larry, and they think that the money we're paying in taxes now, that we're not getting our money's worth, and so they were mad when they had the biggest tax increase in history. They were mad when the president proposed a government-run healthcare system. They want to end welfare as we know it, like President Clinton said in the campaign. But he proposed billions more for welfare.
Control. If you polled Americans, they're in favor of handgun control. Most Americans probably favored the crime bill. Maybe you wanted to go further, but they weren't against it.
In fact, a lot of Americans, what they really disliked about the crime bill is you got billions and billions of dollars of pork barrel and social welfare spending had nothing to do with crime. They got hung on the crime bill. That's just what they hate about Washington.
I got to throw in a couple of facts here.
30 seconds.
First of all, government spending is down under this president. It went up during the Reagan-Bush years as a share of the gross domestic product. The deficit's cut for 3 years in a row. The deficit quadrupled over the past 12 years. These are facts. We need to work together to increase the pace of change.
Out then, David.
Well, that may be, but I do think our major problem is we've turned a corner, but people don't feel it yet. I think they will.
We get a break. We'll come back with David Wilhelm and Haley Barber and more of Larry King Live. They're with us for the full hour and more phone calls. Right now, let's go back to our central headquarters there in Atlanta. And here he is, Bernard Shaw. Bernie.
Thank you, Larry. CNN is ready to call a winner in the Arizona Senate race. This was an open Democratic seat. the Republicans pick up another seat. John Kyle, the Republican, winning in Arizona, the seat vacated by retiring Dennis D. Concini. In Mississippi, a winner, the man from Pascagoula, Trent Lott, the incumbent. No surprise here, Mr. Lott going back to Washington. If the Republicans do not lose any of their 3 open seats, they will have control of the United States Senate. More election results and more of Larry King Live in a moment.
Tonight in the Crossfire, fallout from election 94. Who's licking their wounds? A special recap. Crossfire tonight, 11:30 p.m. Eastern on CNN. The epic quest.
And so far, it's shaping up as a banner night for the Grand Ole Party. So far, they've captured 6 United States Senate seats that were held by the Democrats. The total includes both seats, 7. Bob Fernand, our executive producer down in the control room, reminds me because of the race we just called in Arizona. It was an open Democratic seat. Right. The Republicans took it. And the total includes both seats in Tennessee and the main seat held by retiring Democratic Majority Leader George Mitchell.
And Bernie, despite this strong Republican tide that we're seeing tonight, there are some bright spots for the Democrats. For example, incumbent Chuck Robb has defeated Oliver North in Virginia's bitter, and very expensive U.S. Senate race. Another bright spot for the Democrats, Senator Edward Kennedy has defeated his Republican challenger, Mitt Romney.
And a number of very closely watched races still are much too tight to call, Bill Schneider, and they include the governor's contests in New York, Florida, and Texas.
Every single one of those states has a Democratic incumbent governor. I should note that incumbents have done pretty well tonight. The only incumbent who was defeated was Jim Sasser, the Democratic senator from Tennessee. Otherwise, incumbents of both parties have held on pretty well. It's the open seats that are changing in both the governor's and the senator's races.
And speaking of, were you going to ask him a question?
No, I was just
going
to say, we just want to emphasize that the Republicans have captured 7 Senate seats, and if they don't lose any of their 3 open seats, they've got it. They've got lock, stock, and barrel control of the Senate.
Speaking of incumbents and speaking of open seats, we want to look at the House races, and our very able Frank Sesno has been keeping an eye on those 435 districts. Frank Sesno.
Judy, and a raised eyebrow with that. We are very early in the Senate races, in the House races so far in terms of anything being declared winners or losers. But at this stage, the Republicans are doing very, very well in the House returns so far as we see them. Right now, as you can see, in this balance of power, going into the election, the Democrats had 256 seats, the Republicans 178. There was 1 independent. Now, there has been 1 pickup so far, Stu Rothenberg. There's a lot going on out there. And Tom Barlow in Kentucky won, losing. We talked about that as a leading wave earlier on. What does it mean?
Absolutely. Kentucky 1 is a very Democratic district. It's also very anti-Clinton. Apparently, the anti-Clinton mood has overwhelmed the partisanship. Republican pickup big problems for the Democrats nationally.
It might be worth noting that Barlow voted for the Clinton budget, but there are some very other big people who are in big trouble. Let's go to North Carolina 7 district there with Charlie Rose. He had intended to run for Speaker of the House. He's in trouble at this hour against Robert Anderson, a virtual nobody. But other seats in North Carolina as well. Richard Moore is in trouble against David Funderburk, the Republican. Martin Lancaster, the Democrat, the incumbent there, in trouble, as is Sandy Sands. 4 Democratic open seats, all trending Republican right now. And in Illinois, a very big name, Dan Rostenkowski, with 32%, reporting in big trouble against Michael Flanagan, 31-year-old lawyer. Virtually no campaign either for Rostenkowski, and he is in very serious trouble. One other person we're looking at, too early to say whether this is trouble for real, but Lee Hamilton, locked in a very tight race in Indiana. So right now, this is trending for the Republicans. Back to the national desk.
Frank Sesno, thanks very much. The 5th District, Chicago, Danny Rostenkowski, I'm a Chicagoan, and that doesn't mean anything, but there was no campaign in this man's district until a week ago. Rostenkowski virtually did no advertising or anything, and he just sort of walked around.
That's right, but this was a race of Rostenkowski versus Rostenkowski. He survived the Democratic primary because the organization came out for him, but he lost, or he is running behind. He hasn't lost, we haven't declared, in the general election, because between the primary and the general election, he was indicted, and the easiest way to defeat an incumbent is to defeat him personally. The indictment made a difference.
And he's a 30, how many year incumbent here? 30 some odd.
30 some odd.
30 some odd years. I won't put you on the spot.
Time.
A long time he's been there. We are keeping a very close eye on the Senate, where, as we said just a moment ago, if the Republicans hold on to what we have at this hour, they will pick up 7 Democratic seats. But we are still watching to see those races, and we're going to our own Bruce Morton, who's at the Senate desk. Bruce.
Well, Judy, you're right, of course. Things are headed very much the Republicans' way at this hour. Here's where we started. At the dawn of this election day, 44 Republican seats in the Senate, 56 Democratic. Obviously, the Republicans needed 7 to gain control. Here's where we are now. They've gained 7. If nothing changes, if they don't lose any of the seats they have, there are still 11 undecided seats in play here, they'll have control, but it's too early to say they've got it yet. Now back to the national desk.
Thank you very much, Bruce. And Dan Rostenkowski was going for his 19th term. He's been in the House of Representatives 36 years.
I knew you'd come up with that. Thanks.
Okay, let's check in. There's been a lot of action, as you know, at the state houses. Jean Reserve is there, and she's watching the tally as it fluctuates.
Bernie, it may be too early to call this a tsunami, but a Republican wave certainly does appear to be shaping up when it comes to the governor's races. Before Election Day, Democrats held a majority of the governor's mansions in the country. Early signs are that may not be the case when the night is over. Democrats now hold 29 governor's mansions. 21 belong to the Republicans. 1 is in independent hands. That's 20 Republican and 1 independent. Now we have a net change here of 4 for the Republicans. They have taken over 4 that were in Democratic hands. One of those is Wyoming, where Republican State Senator John Geringer defeated Democratic Secretary of State Kathy Carpin. Exit polls show Geringer made significant inroads among moderate Democrats. There was also a Clinton factor in the race. 58% of the voters in the state said they felt that Mr. Clinton's policies on natural resources hurt that state. Of those, 72% voted for Geringer. Wyoming was the first state in the nation to elect a woman governor. That was 70 years ago. They had a woman in the race tonight, but they didn't do the same thing. In fact, the women's vote split 50-50 between those 2 candidates. Ohio's Republican Governor George Voinovich had lots of money and lots of approval going into this race, and that helped him keep Democratic heavyweights out of the race and hold off a challenge from Democratic State Senator Robert Birch. CNN has declared Voinovich the winner in this, and here we see some numbers with 33% of the precincts reporting. In his jubilance, the governor thanked his supporters.
Tonight's great victory and your vote of confidence and faith confirm that you do pay attention, that you do care. And because you have made a difference, you're allowing me to make a difference. And I want to thank you for renewing my contract for another 4 years.
Exit polls show the incumbent governor capitalized on anti-Clinton sentiment in that state. 90% of those who disapprove of President Clinton voted for Voinovich. The good economy helped him tremendously. It hasn't helped Bill Clinton much, but a number of Midwestern governors, Republicans all, have been helped by an improving economy, like Voinovich, Edgar in Illinois, and Engler in Michigan. One race in which the Democrats did apparently hang on was Arkansas, but that, of course, is the home state of Bill Clinton. Now back to the national desk.
Thanks, Gene. Bill Schneider, you've been looking at those governors' wins, and what do you see?
I see 4 governors that have changed from Democratic to Republican, and every single one was an open seat where the Democratic incumbent was not running for re-election. It's the open seats we're watching.
Because they count. Exit polls we're watching, and you have some more.
That's right. We have exit polls based on the entire American electorate, everybody who voted today, and how they voted for Congress. Now, was Clinton a factor? 51% of Americans said they disapproved of President Clinton's performance as president, and they voted overwhelmingly Republican. So it's pretty clear that Clinton's disapproval rating was a drag on Democratic candidates. Now, what about Congress? Disapprove of Congress. 79% of Americans today said they disapprove of the job Congress is doing, and they voted 3-2 for Republicans over Democrats. Clinton and Congress were both drags. Male voters, you see a gender gap. Republicans had a clear lead among male voters, but among women voters in the country, the Democrats had a slight lead. This is a gender gap. Overall, we're seeing a slight edge for Republicans over Democrats nationwide. and that could lead to the first Republican majority. We don't know yet until we start counting up the House tallies.
Thanks very much, Bill Schneider. When we come back, Larry King Live with David Wilhelm of the DNC and Haley Barbour of the RNC as CNN continues its night-long election coverage.
CNN's Campaign USA 9.
Taking care of business for almost 50 years. The Dearborn Sausage Company.
Museum Moderne Kunst, Vienna.
Design inspiration
Museum für angewandte Kunst, Munich.
is the design inspiration for the Movado Museum collection of watches.
Victoria and Albert Museum, London.
Movado, the museum watch.
We're back with Haley Barbour and David Wilhelm on this election night edition of Larry King Live. Are you going to take the Senate? Can you confirm that now, Haley?
Well, it looks like we are, Larry. We've won 7. The Democrats, I know, hold out hopes for Minnesota. I think our chances in Minnesota are pretty darn good. Also, I think we've got a real shot to pick up Pennsylvania. And the California race is going to be very, very close. Not closer than people each know.
They just reported that most incumbents are winning tonight. Now, we don't have all the House stories, and you deny that? These were open seats that the Republicans have won in the Senate, right?
All but the Sasser seat in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Of course,
that's the only incumbent to lose so far, right?
Right, that's correct.
Sasser is the only incumbent to lose.
Sasser is the only incumbent at this point that has lost.
Right.
There are incumbents in very tight races, Senator Wofford among them, but the incumbents who have battled and battled hard and made their case are hanging on at this point.
You were also talking during the break about the majority you're getting in these governorship races, right? That's a big story to you, not just winning.
Yeah, in a year that people talk about anti-incumbent, the incumbent Republican governors are winning with, you just saw George Voinovich, 71% of the vote, just outrageous votes. And it's because people approve of what they've done. They've cut taxes, they've cut spending, they've made their state government smaller, and the states have prospered. And so even in, these are not Republican states, Massachusetts and Minnesota and Michigan and Ohio. There's a lesson there, that there's a way you can govern that gets tremendous job approval. People think it's successful. These Republican governors have done it.
And I'd point to Roy Romer on our side, a Democratic incumbent who won tonight with a large margin. And I would also make the case again, and it's a case that must not be fully understood yet by the American people, but we have cut spending. We have cut the deficit. We have created jobs. We have turned a corner, and I certainly hope that ultimately there will be recognition of that fact.
Perot supported Romer. Perot supported Lautenberg. He supported the independent in New York, but basically that was for Cuomo. And he's running against Foley. If Foley loses and Cuomo wins, this is a sweep for Perot. Can he claim that?
Well,
guys, why do you both laugh?
I think it was endorsing Roy Romer is getting in front of a parade. Roy Romer was 20 percentage points ahead at the time. I'm sure Governor Romer appreciated the support, but I would hardly credit Roy Romer's victory to Ross Perot.
Larry, 80% of the people in New York who voted for Ross Perot want Mario Cuomo out. You don't win in politics by being for what everybody that supports you is against.
Fairfax, Virginia. Hello.
Mr. Barbour, Mr. Wilhelm. For 2 years, you fellows have had national polls that show 60 to 70% of the American voters disapprove of President Clinton and the Democrat Congress. But 80% of the people disbelieve and distrust the national media, including CNN. Now, we citizens can clean out Clinton and Congress with votes, but how do we clean out the left-wing national media?
80% includes CNN as left-wing media, so where did you get that from?
80% of the national media, including, note the including, CNN.
Is what? Well, obviously they've had a little effect tonight.
I don't know. I would argue that. I'd say it's a tough case to make right now that the media is a left-wing leaning media. I think they've been extraordinarily hard on this president. And I guess in a way that is the role of the media, to be tough. But the fact that some of the essential facts of the past 21 months are not known I guess we have to take...
Would you go that far as that caller? Would you say it's a left-wing media?
Well, let me say this. What you see, you ask, what can you do about this? What you see happening around the country are things like talk radio, things like C-SPAN, things like the Larry King Show, where viewers get to get it unfiltered through the media elites. And I think that's been very healthy for America. It is very healthy that you don't just have 3 networks that decide what is the news you're supposed to see. That's what needs to be done.
You have a left-wing media, it's failing.
Yeah.
Well, and appropriately so.
I think that's an almost impossible case to make tonight and over the past
certainly the influence isn't. We'll take a break, come back with our remaining moments of this Larry King Live Special Election Night edition. Don't go away. Continuous round-the-clock coverage on this election night. Capitol Gang coming back later. So, too, is Crossfire. We're with David Wilhelm and Haley Barbour. And the whole crew in Atlanta will be with you right at the top of the hour. Right now, let's get a thought from overseas. County Cork, Ireland. Hello.
Hello, Larry.
Hi.
How are you? Fergus O'Mahony ringing from County Cork in Ireland.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask the 2 gentlemen on the panel, why is there so much sleaze in American politics, in modern politics today, when people should be getting back to genuine, traditional, old politics like we have in Ireland?
What went wrong? They don't have sleaze in Ireland.
Well, let me say, one thing David and I agree on, when you see us on TV, we have very strong disagreements, but it's about issues. I mean, we think very differently about what's in the best interest of the country. And there is way too much in campaigns in our country of personal attacks. Some of it's unavoidable because you have people who are carrying baggage when they get into the race, Rob and North, for instance. But a lot of it is because political consultants, when they see they're losing on the issues, when they see things going against them, the only thing they can do to change the subject is a personal attack. I'm not so sure those personal attacks are working very well this year, and I hope that the public will reject them and rebel against them.
Yeah, this is an area where we are in agreement. There is way too much negativism. There are way too many personal ad hominem attacks on the character of public officials. Think about it this way. Imagine if airlines ran attack ads. There would be some airlines that would win under such advertising. There would be some that would lose. But the overall confidence in the airline industry would plummet. And that's what's happening to our political system.
Los Angeles, hello.
Yeah, good evening. I have a question for Mr. Barbour, and I'd appreciate a candid answer. Sir, are you from the future? Are you a time traveler?
Yeah, he is.
No,
they found you out.
There's a candid answer? No.
A time traveler. Well, it's a California voter. They're probably all in a little shell shock right now, right? Would you say people are glad this race is over? This is a campaign.
I'd say probably yes. I think people were ready for these midterm elections to be held. I think I would say yes to that. I would personally have liked to have had a couple of more weeks. I think we had a case to make. I think we were beginning to make it. We obviously haven't closed the deal, but I'll say it again. We've turned a corner. I really, really hope that I absolutely believe so, but I don't think people
couple of
see
individual
it
things,
yet.
guys. Did you see the Rostenkowski thing coming?
Well, we didn't see it until late. I'll tell you a funny little story. 3 weeks ago, the campaign for Flanagan called us and says, we have a poll that shows Rostenkowski down 16. I said, give me a break. I said, we're not taking that. So I took a pollster that we had a lot of confidence in, and we paid him to take a poll. Showed Rostenkowski down 19. And so that
sent some money in.
And so we sent some money, tried to keep it quiet because we knew, we were worried that if they knew we were after him, that they could just overpower us.
Other than Rob, what race did you win tonight you were worried about? Were you worried about Lautenberg?
Sure. New Jersey is always a tough state. New Jersey is a state where undecideds break against the incumbent. Yeah, that was a good win. We are very pleased to see Senator Lautenberg return, and also Senator Bingaman in New Mexico. That was
if you lost anything tonight, you thought you were going to win to this minute.
Well, we thought we had a real shot at Bingaman and Lautenberg, but of the 3 Senate races that people talked about our having a prospect, obviously the one was North. That North was a dead heat going in. We felt like the turnout dynamics favored us. Our people were fired up, but it must have been a big, big turnout in Northern Virginia.
Also in Candor, Nancy Reagan hurt him, didn't he? I mean, she's a very popular woman with a very popular husband.
Sure she did.
Gets front page attention, 2 days before the election.
I think the whole litany of Republican leaders that came out against Oliver North hurt Jim badly.
Oh, look, I get paid to make the tough decisions, but one of the things, one of the things that Larry, you got to say, North got nuked every day. He and Newt Gingrich, anytime the press had something bad that could be seen through the bad filter, boy, they got nuked every time. But it's just, you know, the people of Virginia spoke, and if Chuck Robb's who they want to reelect, hey, I'm going to salute, and we'll do the best we can to work with him or anybody else.
All right, give me, we got a couple of minutes left. Forecast. Let's say things hold, and as they are now, the Republicans take the Senate. We won't gauge the House. It's too early. Give me the next 2 years.
The Republicans have a decision that they've got to make. They've got to decide whether they are going to continue the obstructionism of the past 2 years, whether or not we're going to have that kind of government, or will they begin to take responsibility for moving things forward. My hope is that the Republicans will stop the shenanigans of the past 2 years. Their strategy evidently has worked. They knew that the Democrats as the governing party would wear the jacket if we failed to move forward on certain pieces of legislation. But now, if they do in fact gain control of at least one of the houses, they've got to share responsibility with the Democrats to govern. And that's going to be the real test of the next 2 years.
Next 2 years.
The American people answered a question tonight. The question was, which way America? Republicans, this is a beginning for us, not an end. David's right about that. We have a responsibility. But our responsibility is to fulfill the verdict that the American people rendered tonight. Our responsibility is to do what we promised to do. The American people are looking to us to make government smaller, taxes lower, have more individual freedom and individual responsibility, less government power and less government responsibility. That is our obligation, and the American people are going to rightly look to us to see if we fulfill their verdict. And I hope that Bill Clinton's attitude about that is we ought to work together to fulfill that verdict, not to try to get around that verdict, not to try to deny that verdict.
He's going to work
and the president has made that clear. And I would just put you won't be surprised, but I would put a little different spin on this, that we need to continue to work together to produce the change that we've already begun to produce in this country. Government is smaller, it is leaner, it is more efficient, the deficit has been reduced, and we are on a path to strong economic recovery, and it's been because of the leadership of the past 2 years. And I hope that we can continue that.
David and I have gotten to be friends, and I have genuine affection for him, but the Democrats cannot deny the answer the American people gave them tonight. They said, we don't like the direction you're going in. We reject your agenda. We can all work together if everybody will accept the American people's verdict. We're going to do that. And the good news is there are a lot of Democrats who are going to do it, and I hope Bill Clinton's one of them.
And the verdict is, give us change. Show us. Show us. We are frustrated with the pace of change. Show us that you can get it done. Show us that you can do it together. And I think that's the challenge for the next 2 years.
You're going to stay in the post?
Well, I'm up for re-election in January, and
you're going to run again?
If my wife will let me.
You're leaving, right?
I'm leaving. I got to get back to Chicago. My wife's 2 weeks away from giving birth to our first child, so I'm in trouble if I don't get there quickly.
I got a feeling you're going to miss him.
In fairness to my wife, she's been super supportive of this. She's tolerant after 23 years.
Thanks to David Wilhelm and Haley Barbour, our guests for the full special hour edition of Larry King Live tonight. Tomorrow night, winners from all over the United States on Larry King Live with your phone calls. Bernie and Judy and the whole crew in Atlanta will be back after these words. Thanks for joining us. Don't go away.
It's a vision worthy of the early pioneers who built the state out of wilderness.
Republican Don Sundquist, the winner in Tennessee's gubernatorial race. Republicans very happy tonight as they continue victories from the State House to the Senate.
We've got...
In Iowa, CNN declares Terry Branstad, the incumbent Republican, the winner in his race.
In New Mexico, the governor's race, CNN declares Gary Johnson the challenger. This is a pickup. Johnson is a Republican. This is a pickup for the Republican Party.
CNN declares that Conrad Burns, the Republican incumbent, In Montana, Senate race will be going back to Washington.
Now looking at how the Senate stacks up at this hour going into tonight, 56 Democrats, 44 Republicans at this hour. At this hour, 10 undecided, but the totals are moving in the Republican direction, 47 Republican to 43 Democrat. 51 needed to have a majority.
Welcome again to CNN's continuous coverage of Election 94. I'm Bernard Shaw, Judy Woodruff, and Bill Schneider. The Republicans have grabbed 7 of the Democrats' open seats, and they appear on their way to controlling the United States Senate.
That's right. There are a couple of possibilities for Democratic pickups. They don't look very likely. One in Minnesota, and we'll be looking for what's happening in the state of Washington. But assuming the Republicans get control of the Senate, they've gained enough seats so far to do that. It's going to be a very different Washington. Bill Clinton is going to face a very hostile Republican majority. They are going to have to decide, the Republican majority, if they do have it in the Senate, whether they want to govern in a bipartisan coalition with Bill Clinton or whether they believe that their mandate in this election is to oppose Bill Clinton, and that's the way they want to carry out for the next 2 years.
Well, let's take a look at that gubernatorial race in the Empire State. Governor Mario Cuomo leading... Oh, no. Look at this, folks. George Pataki, the Republican, 50% over Mario Cuomo so far, and Tom Golisano, the independent, 5%. Jeannie Mose is standing by. Oh, this just updated before we go to Jeannie. This is the latest. George Pataki now 49%. Incumbent Mario Cuomo 44%. Golisano 5%. Jeannie Mose is at Cuomo headquarters. What are they thinking about over there?
Well, I mean, it's a squeaker, and everyone kind of knew it was going to be a squeaker. This is the cover of the New York Post this morning. Photo finish, they were predicting. Only 2 points separating the two in the latest polls. And so what people are doing here now is just waiting for these numbers to come in. There are a couple of thousand Cuomo volunteers behind the camera. Behind me is the VIP area, and they're all kind of in the same boat, waiting for these figures to come in, sort of rushing from television to television with the latest results from the different channels. Now, Mario Cuomo himself is upstairs in a room here at the Sheraton watching the returns come in. His wife, Matilda, has been downstairs giving interviews. You know, she made some news earlier in the campaign, calling her husband's opponent a lightweight. Well, now that lightweight is giving her husband a run for the money. I'm Jeannie Mose reporting live back to the National Desk.
Well, Jeannie, New York is not the only place where they're counting those governor's votes closely. In the state of Texas, very close race we were expecting going into tonight between George W. Bush, the Republican, challenging Ann Richards, the incumbent. At this hour, as you can see, George Bush is ahead with 26% of the vote counted, 55% to 45%. CNN's own Tony Clark is standing by in Austin, Texas at Richards' headquarters. What are they saying there, Tony?
You know, the interesting thing is the mood here is not glum, but it is surprise every time numbers go up on the board. And as you just said, the last numbers showed a gap of about 10%. Richards down by about 10% after feeling that this was going to be a very close race. There is surprise here that the margin is so far. But what Richards officials say is that it is still very early in the evening, that this is early voting. Texas has early voting, and that this is a time when Republicans would get it. They're saying simply wait until a little bit later when their vote comes in. I'm Tony Clark, CNN, reporting live from Richards' headquarters. Now back to the National Desk.
Thank you, Tony. Let's quickly take you to the headquarters of Chuck Robb, the incumbent Democrat from the Senate. He's there with his wife, Linda Bird Robb, the rest of his family, and Judy Woodruff.
This is a happy night for that family. They really sweated this election out.
Bill Schneider, the exit polling must be fascinating from this race.
Oh, it is. It indicates that the character issue, which which did work against both candidates, ended up working much worse, having a much bigger impact against Oliver North. Chuck Robb, at least, was sort of fear of the known versus fear of the unknown in Virginia. It looks like fear of the known was what won out.
Thank you.
From the bottom of my heart, thank you. I am very grateful to all of you for making it possible. As our distinguished Lieutenant Governor and next governor said just a minute ago, George Foreman is indeed an inspiration.
In Virginia, the Battle of the Marines, Chuck Robb beat Oliver North tonight. Last night, Jeb Bush, who's running in Florida against incumbent Lawton Chiles, described his father as a nervous wreck. Let's take a look at the raw vote so far. With 54% of the precincts in, incumbent Chiles leading Jeb Bush 51% to Bush's 49%. Charles Bierbauer, you're at the Bush headquarters. What's going on?
Well, it's loud here, but that's only the battle of the bands, Bernie. We really haven't seen a whole lot of things to cheer about here. You know, Florida's a state where you've got to worry about jumping to conclusions. Jeb Bush knew he would be out in front early, as he was this evening, but he needed to be out in front by a substantial enough margin with the early votes coming in from the north and the western and the panhandle and those parts of the state where Republicans are stronger. It would appear that as the votes come in from Broward County, from Palm Beach, where the Democrats are strong, with African Americans, with Jewish voters, and with Union voters, that Governor Chiles may be able to pull back and pull into the lead, depending on the votes yet to come from Dade County, where we are, where Jeb Bush is counting on the Hispanics and the Cubans. So you've got to add them all up very carefully, not jump to any conclusions, but the real trick would have been for Jeb Bush to get far out in front. I'm not sure that he's done that. Bernie?
Okay. All right, we're just getting word. Thank you, Charles. We're just getting word. This information is coming in so fast we can barely keep up. The Nebraska Senate race, the Democratic incumbent Bob Kerrey has hung on. He will be coming back to Washington. And right now, we want to talk, Bernie, to a very guest, a very special guest, I guess you'd say, in Fort Worth, Texas.
H. Ross Perot, good evening.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Great. Good night. It's a great night.
That depends on your perspective. If you're a Democrat, it's not so great.
If you're an independent, it's perfect.
What about the Texas governor's race? You endorsed, you supported Ann Richards. It's a very close one with George W. Bush.
It's a close race. We'll see how it comes out. Feel strongly she's the best qualified candidate. Our primary focus is on the national races. We're watching them like a hawk. The big bellwether races, 2 of the 3 are done. Olympia Snow, she was running against George Mitchell's hand-picked successor. She's slam dunking. Frist was running against the man that would have been in Tennessee, was running against Sasser, who would have been the next majority leader of the Senate. He got it. Now, we're going out west. I guess you don't want to talk about that yet, but we've got
we're fast running out of time. I asked one question.
We've got the race for the speaker.
We have a lot of questions we wanted to ask you. Well, we're out of time. Judy?
And we understand that in Virginia, Oliver North will have to wait for just a minute. We are going to go to Oliver North. He's talking to a crowd in Richmond, Virginia.
Is an emphatic yes. For you see, the real consequence of this campaign is not just in the results of today's ballot. Your eagerness to bring about real change in how we are governed has forever altered the political landscape all across this land. And how appropriate it is that this effort has sprung forth from this cradle of liberty, the red clay of Virginia. You and your extraordinary dedication to see me elected have not failed. You have successfully redefined political debate throughout this land of ours. In this contest, you have made it clear that henceforth every race will be about the role of government in our lives. Because of you, every one of you, every future candidate for office will have to explain to the electorate their vision for how government will make our streets safer, our schools better, our jobs certain, our nation secure. Because of you, we'll have more candidates who want our government to stop investing in failure and stop punishing success. We'll have candidates have candidates who will win because they want government to be smaller, less intrusive, and who will rein it in. We'll have fewer office holders who wish to create more arcane laws and regulations or to assign special rights or privilege to the few. We will elect men and women of principle who will put principle ahead of politics, who deem the next generation to be more important than their next election. All this is possible because you came together to support this campaign.
Listening to some personal remarks from Oliver North to a crowd of his supporters in Richmond, Virginia. Oliver North, the loser tonight in the United States Senate race in Virginia. He lost to the incumbent Chuck Robb. We want to go back now to Fort Worth, Texas, and to our interview with Ross Perot. Well, Mr. Perot, at this hour, the folks you endorsed in this race, some of them independents, some of them Republicans, and some of them Democrats, the results coming in are mixed. Lautenberg is all right, but in New York, Mr. Golisano's not doing very well.
Our objective in endorsing him was to get that independent party way up the ballot in New York State. We knew he couldn't win. We made that very clear at the time. We've got a whole series of people we've been giving strong support to across the country. They're doing great. The only horse race we've got where we thought we'd have a winner is the Texas governor's race. It's not over.
What do you think is going to happen there?
Oh, who knows? But the exciting thing, see, CNN really put the ball in play over the idea of giving the Republicans a chance because so few people approved of the way government was being run. That ball was put in play on CNN. We're watching the 2-minute drill tonight. I think it looks pretty exciting. I think the people will do it.
You have any advance word on the Foley-Nethercutt race? You endorsed Mr. Nethercutt, the Republican, up in Washington State.
Everything I feel, sense, and hear is that Nethercutt will take it. That will be a shot heard across this country. The Democrats will repent and be reborn. Both parties will focus on the working American and the middle class. We have a bright future ahead of us if all this takes place.
As you know, at CNN, our credo is impartiality. What did you mean by that remark, CNN gave the Republicans a chance?
No, I said that was put in play one night on Larry King. I said we ought to give the Republicans a chance. They can't get any worse. Maybe it'll get better. Looks like the American people are going to do it.
Okay, H. Ross Perot, Fort Worth, Texas, a man smiling tonight. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. And CNN will continue its live, non-stop coverage of this election night in a moment. In Virginia Senate race, those two battling Marines, you just saw Oliver North and his wife leave. Earlier in a concession speech to Robb, he said that henceforth every race will be about the role of government in our lives. And Robb tonight began his opening remarks by saying how sweet it is. And you apparently felt that North's address to his people was quite eloquent.
Well, it was eloquent because it was a simple statement of his principles and his ideology. He did not sound like an extremist. He was accused throughout the campaign of being too extreme. He sounded like a hardcore Republican stating his principles. Every race should be about the role of government, and he said we should not reward failure, we should not punish success. If he had sounded that reasonable throughout the campaign, he might have done better.
Well, Virginia was one close Senate race we've all been keeping an eye on. There's another race that we are still watching, and that's the one in Pennsylvania, where at this hour, with 66% of the votes counted, the Democrat Harris Wofford is holding on to a lead of 50% to 47% against Congressman Rick Santorum.
After Robb, Wofford is probably the most endangered Democratic incumbent. Robb survived. Wofford is barely holding on. His opponent much more conservative than any Republican senator recently from Pennsylvania.
His name is Kennedy from Massachusetts. This is the raw vote with 30% of the precincts in. CNN has called this race for the incumbent Democrat over Mitt Romney.
It looked like he might be endangered early on. He turned it around. Mitt Romney ran an aggressive campaign against Kennedy, but he came back fighting and had to run negative ads.
And in the state of Tennessee, the Republicans pick up not one, but two seats in the United States Senate. Bill Frist, the winner, a surprise winner to the Democrats. A month ago, everybody thought Jim Sasser was a shoo-in to win re-election. Dr. Bill Frist, a heart surgeon, has been declared the winner.
Sasser, the only incumbent to be defeated in the United States Senate. And he, of course, was one of 2 Senate seats in Tennessee. One wonders if he were the only incumbent senator running in Tennessee, if he would have done this badly.
Quickly down a bit, Romney in Boston conceding to Senator Edward Kennedy in that very tough Senate race.
I guess the numbers are going to show that roughly 1 million people, by the time the ballots are all counted, roughly 1 million people will have taken the chance on someone new, someone who was a voice for change, will have voted for me for United States Senator, and to them I say thank you very much.
In Tennessee, an actor, also a former Watergate counsel lawyer, Fred Thompson, he's the winner in that second race. He has 61% of the vote, Bill.
Yes, that's right. And Mr. Cooper, the Democratic congressman he defeated, was one of the authors of an alternative health plan to the Clinton health plan, and he lost badly tonight.
And in Michigan, we've declared the Republican Spencer Abraham the winner, defeating Congressman Bob Carr.
Yes, that's another pickup by the Republicans of an open seat being given up by Democrat Don Riegel in Michigan.
In Washington, D.C., this is the race with 35% of the precincts in. Marion Barry, the Democrat, who had served 3 terms as mayor and 1 6-month term in prison after he was caught on tape smoking crack cocaine in 1990. He's leading Carol Schwartz. And joining us now on CNN's nonstop election night coverage, a man who conceivably, according to all indications, look at the smile on his face. The Republicans have captured 7 seats in the Senate. Robert Dole, formerly minority leader of the Senate this morning, but it looks like, Mr. Dole, you're going to be on top.
Well, I'm not certain yet. We still have Washington State. I think we're okay there. We need to win one of the 2 races in Minnesota or Pennsylvania. Montana, I understand, has been projected as a Republican hold, so we don't pick up anything. But we're excited about it. We hope it happens. We'd like to end up with about 52-48. That would give us a bit of a margin.
Have you called 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, or has 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue called you?
No, I've had a very good visit with Senator Mitchell. He was very gracious. I recall in '86 when I was in my office and he was winning, it was a long night for me, and I think it's a fairly long night for him. But we both agree that we're not certain yet. I mean, it would appear that we would have a majority, but I'm not certain. But in any event, we think the American people, we've heard the American people. I think they voted for change. They voted for Republicans. We're making big gains in governor's races, House races, big upsets all across the country. There's still going to be one surprise out there. I'm not certain which way it's going to go. Maybe California, maybe Nevada. So we're going to stay tuned.
Okay, but if you become majority leader, how can you maintain that position and run for the Republican Party's presidential nomination in '96?
Well, I haven't made the judgment on '96. I think I've been totally focused on winning or helping win seats all across the country, governors, state house, whatever, the House of Representatives, senators. But it seemed to me if President Clinton's going to run again, and if he can run for president as president, surely somebody who was a majority leader, whether it's Bob Dole or someone else, could probably run for president.
President Clinton has a very, very ambitious domestic policy program. When he comes back, when the 104th Congress comes in January, he wants to hit the ground running. Obviously, that has a bearing on his re-election chances in '96. How much do you intend to cut him off at the pass?
Well, my view is the American people, they give us a majority. They've given us also a burden to carry, and they expect us to respond. And I don't think they expect us at every opportunity to try to block the president. They expect us to work for the president where we have big differences to oppose the president. But for the most part, as you know, Bernie, many things that happen in Congress, things that should happen in Congress, good things, are done on a nonpartisan or bipartisan basis. And we'll try to continue that. It's going to be, I remember President Reagan and President Bush working with Democratic Congresses. It was tougher. Many of their programs never got out of committee. But my view is we can work together. I intend to call, if we have a majority, call the president in the morning and suggest that I'm prepared. I think Newt Gingrich will do the same, And we know that the American people expect us to be responsible. That's the bottom line.
Is your attitude now that we're in the majority, we don't want to blow it?
Well, my attitude is if we have a majority, we better demonstrate that we can produce. And I don't mean produce doesn't always mean passing legislation, but it means being responsible, listening to the people. There is this anti-government mood out there, anti-tax, anti-regulation. And I might, you know, if we're in the majority, you'll see Bob Dole smiling a lot more, as my mother-in-law, Mrs. Hanford, says I should.
Bob Dole in Washington. Thanks for joining us, Judy. He sounds very reflective.
He certainly does, and he's got a lot to reflect on this evening and tomorrow as well. And Bernie, I'm told that we're ready to declare a winner in the North Dakota Senate race, and we're going to see what we're ready to declare. Here it is. The incumbent Democrat, Kent Conrad, has defeated his Republican challenger, Ben Clayburgh. This was considered a solid Democratic seat. Not a big surprise here, Bill.
That's right. He has an unusual career. He was elected in 1986 and promised he would not seek re-election in 92 unless the deficit was cut by 80%. It wasn't. He kept his promise. But then the other senator from North Dakota, Quentin Burdick, died, and there was a special election in December of 92. He ran in that election. He's filling the vacancy of Senator Burdick, and now he's running for the full term.
We're calling the gubernatorial contest in Pennsylvania. Tom Ridge, the Republican, 49 from Erie, picking up that seat. Mark Singal, the lieutenant governor, a loser tonight.
This is a very big state and a very big Republican victory, again in an open race because the incumbent, Robert Casey, was not eligible to run for re-election.
In South Dakota, we declare a winner, Bill Janklow. This was an open seat. Janklow was a former governor of South Dakota. He has won office once again, defeating the Democrat Jim Beto.
Yes, that's right. He defeated the incumbent governor in a primary, and he is a former governor who's now come back to serve again.
We have a winner in the Rhode Island Senate race, incumbent John Chafee, going for his fourth term.
Well, this is not a surprise, but Rhode Island is probably the most Democratic state in the country. John Chafee, always considered safe. He's a moderate Republican, one of the most moderate in the Senate.
I was just quickly looking to see, but apparently he will not be one of the new Republican committee chairmen if they hang on.
But he'll be a key player on health care.
Absolutely.
Our coverage of election night, and there's a lot of results still to come, will continue in just a moment. Well over half, in fact, all the states' polls have closed at this hour. We're watching Senate races, governor's races, and races for the House of Representatives. And Bill Schneider, you're looking at some exit polls.
I certainly am in the state of New York, where right now George Pataki has a slight lead over Mario Cuomo, who's struggling for re-election. Let's look at the exit polls to tell us why Cuomo is in so much trouble. The economy is the main issue out there, and you see 3/4 of those who say the state's economy is poor are voting for the challenger, the Republican Pataki. By the way, 81% of the New York voters give the economy a poor or not so good rating. Only 18% say it's in excellent or good shape, much worse than any other state we're polling. Another problem Cuomo is having, has he been in office too long? This would be his fourth term. 2/3 of the voters say yes, he has. Terry Branstad was elected for a fourth term, but Cuomo may have trouble making it. Now, Mario Cuomo, the death penalty has been an issue in his race. He proposed allowing the death penalty to be voted on in a referendum, but he insisted there'd be three choices: death penalty for murderers, life in prison without parole, or a long prison term with a chance for parole. He said he bet that people would vote for life imprisonment without parole. Among New York voters today, almost 2/3 say no, they would vote for the death penalty for those who commit murders. And among those who say who are death penalty supporters, Pataki is winning almost 2/3 of the vote. And finally, among white Catholics in New York, who are about half of the New York voters, Pataki has a solid lead, 60% for Pataki, 34% for Cuomo, and that is a key constituency that Cuomo used to carry handily.
We're going to pause for a local cable break. We're not going anywhere. We hope you don't. Back in a moment.
This is CNN.
Simply an extraordinary night in United States political history.
That's right. The Senate balance of power appears to be shifting to the Republicans if they can hold on to the seats that they have now at stake. They have already picked up 7 from the Democrats, enough for a majority.
The last time the Senates were in the majority in the Senate was in 1986. They had held on for 6 years, and then they lost it, and they've been dry for 8 years, and now they're back again.
Bruce Morton at the Senate desk. Bob Dole really parsed his words very, very carefully, not wanting to pop the champagne corks yet.
Well, as people used to say back when there were baseball seasons, it isn't over till it's over, but it's beginning to look a whole lot as if it might be over. Just to review where we are, this is where it started at dawn on this election day. 44 Republicans in the Senate, 56 Democrats. The Republicans needed to gain 7. Now, we've had so far a net change of 7, but there are 7 seats still undecided. Those could go either way. There could be some additional shifts. If they stay the way they are, then the new Senate will be Republican, and Bob Dole will be Mr. Majority Leader. Back to the National Desk.
That's right, and I think we need to clarify that because we were sounding a moment ago as if it were all over. It's not all over. At this moment, the Republicans have 7 seats, but we don't know. There are still several states out there where they conceivably could lose.
There's an open seat that the Republicans now hold in Minnesota that could go to the Democrats. That would be a net of 6, which is not quite a majority. So it's still a cliffhanger. We have some suspense yet to go.
And Winnie, the candidate there in Minnesota. Here is Ted Kennedy in Boston at that hotel. That's a unionized hotel, and he chooses it all the time. He looks good. Earlier, CNN declared Kennedy the winner in his race with Mitt Romney. You heard Mitt Romney here live on CNN just a short while ago, conceding to the senior senator.
You know, I think conservatives had a fantasy that in this election they could take Ted Kennedy out of the Senate, put Oliver North in the Senate, defeat Mario Cuomo in the State House in New York, and defeat Tom Foley for Speaker of the House. So far, 2 of those things have not happened.
There are 5 Kennedys running tonight. We'll keep you posted on how they do. When Senator Ted Kennedy gets up to the podium to say how sweet it is or whatever, we'll be there to hear it. Judy?
And somebody we want to talk to you about all these results is at the White House, George Stephanopoulos, very close advisor to President Clinton. George Stephanopoulos, there's some nice news tonight for the Democrats, but there's also some very difficult news to take, and that is that the Republicans, at least at this hour, have picked up 7 seats.
Yeah, but we still have some hope. I heard you all talking just a couple of minutes ago. We feel good about where Senator Wofford is right now in Pennsylvania, and we think Ann Winnie has a good shot at picking up that seat in Minnesota, so it's too early to say it's over yet in the Senate. We obviously also feel very good about Senator Kennedy, Senator Robb in Virginia. In fact, 9 Democratic incumbents have won tonight. So far, only 1 has lost, so we've had a pretty good night so far. Clearly, there is a message today that the voters want change. They want it to go very, very fast, just as they did in 1992. We hear that.
How do you explain what happened tonight in Tennessee, Mr. Stephanopoulos? You lost both Senate seats in a state which is the vice president's home base.
Well, there's no question that was a disappointment, Judy. We don't feel good about that. It would have been nice for both Senator Sasser and Jim Cooper to pick up those seats, so we feel badly about that. But if you look throughout the South, we're also holding on to some governorships, and we feel good about that. We have to wait and see where all the returns come in and what the numbers are at the end.
What are you hearing, if anything, at this hour about the House seats, the control of the U.S. House?
I think it's really too early to tell. We're doing well on the East Coast so far, a little more disappointing in the South. We still have yet to hear from the West, and I think that's going to be where a lot of the difference is made up. So we're just going to have to wait and see.
Can you draw any conclusions yet about the effect the president may or may not have had on some of these races in his campaigning in this last week or so?
Well, I think there's no question his serious campaigning made a difference. If you look at Senator Kennedy, if you look at Senator Robb, the president made very intensive efforts there. He was out to California several times, and it looks like Senator Feinstein is going to win in California. It looks like we think Senator Wofford can win in Pennsylvania, where the president campaigned an awful lot. And Ann Winnie in Minnesota, as I said, could also pull it out. The president went there twice in just the last week. I would also point out, through the exit polling tonight, it turns out that this really was, in the end, a message about Washington and Congress. 3/4 of the voters who came out of the polls tonight said that this was really about Washington and Congress, not about President Clinton.
All right, George Stephanopoulos at the White House, we thank you for talking with us. We may be talking to you again. Now to Senator Edward Kennedy in Massachusetts, the winner in that Senate race. His wife, Victoria Reggie Kennedy, is at his side. This is a very happy group of people. A lot of Kennedys standing there behind the 32-year incumbent.
First elected 1962.
Just a few minutes ago. Thanks a lot. That's all right. That's all right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Just a few minutes ago, my phone rang. Mitt Romney called me to congratulate me on being re-elected to the United States Senate. And in the conversation, I had indicated that he had fought a hard campaign. He was a worthy spokesman for the Republican Party, and I wished him well into the future. We thank him for the battle he has waged, and we're glad about the outcome to go back to the I want to thank the people of Massachusetts for the greatest public honor that any citizen could have of this state, and that is representing the people in the United States Senate. Today was not a victory for a candidate or a victory for a party. It was a victory for those that believe we should have a voice and a vote and a fighter in the United States Senate that's going to fight.
This was a candidate who, in two debates with his Republican challenger, Mitt Romney, really did much better than expected. And Bill and Bernie, I think that has to be counted as one of the main reasons he won re-election.
He showed he still had some fight. He reassured Massachusetts voters that he was up to the job after the very negative way he'd been portrayed by his opponent, Mitt Romney. And remember, Bill Clinton is quite popular in Massachusetts. Remember this, too. Things are going a little better in the Massachusetts economy. Today, they re-elected Ted Kennedy, a Democrat, to the Senate, and overwhelmingly a Republican governor.
And he never shied away from wearing his liberal's tie. The House of Representatives, Frank Sesno, has been very, very busy. Frank, how does it look in the House?
It looks like very big news tonight, Bernie, in the House of Representatives. CNN is now estimating that the Republicans will pick up 46 seats in the House of Representatives this evening. That will easily give them control of the House of Representatives for the first time in 40 years. Going into the election, the Democrats held 256, the Republicans 178. The Republicans needed 40. The balance of power has shifted over the course of the evening. So far, the Republicans have picked up 9 officially, but in state after state after state, the Republicans are leading. We're here now with Stu Rothenberg. You've been watching the House with us very, very closely. In Indiana, there is a Republican wave. In North Carolina, a Republican wave. In Tennessee, in Georgia, Dan Rostenkowski's in trouble. What do you see?
Absolutely. What's happening, Frank, is the Republicans are sweeping through the South and winning other places as well. All the most vulnerable Democrats are going down, and the second and third tier vulnerable Democrats are also going down, too.
Over in Oklahoma, in the 4th District there, Dave McCurdy's old seat, J.C. Watts has picked that up, the second African-American who's a Republican going to the House of Representatives.
Absolutely. The Republicans have been very anxious to pick up another African-American congressman, and they're picking up these open seats left by Democrats running for the U.S. Senate, so that's a bit of a problem. The Democrats can't hold those seats.
Did you think it was going to be this big?
I thought it was going to be big, 35 to 40 seats. 46, it's hard to predict when it's that big.
Okay, and we're going to be watching this, of course, throughout the night. We have to move out to the West Coast and see where that's going in California and Washington. But again, the CNN estimates 46 seats to the Republicans, giving them control of the House of Representatives for the first time in 4 decades. Back to the National Desk.
All right, thanks, Frank and Bill. I guess it's been since, 1954 that both the Republican Party held both houses of Congress. And based on what we're seeing right now, it's looking likely it's going to happen again tonight.
Looks very likely. This is an earthquake. This is a tidal wave. Political scientists call it a realigning election. It means this balance of power is really shifting, and we have Bill Clinton in office with 2 years having to live with what looks very likely to be a Republican-controlled Congress. There's going to be a lot of anger at Bill Clinton because after 40 years, if the Republicans carry the House, the Democrats will lose their power base in Washington, the House of Representatives. They've held it for 40 years. And I bet that this is going to mean that some primary opponents may challenge Bill Clinton for the presidency. They do not want to run with him at the top of the ticket in 1996 after this experience.
And can you imagine what is going through Newt Gingrich's mind right here outside suburban Atlanta?
That's right. We're going to go to a break, but when we come back, we have a lot to talk about.
CNN's Campaign US.
The new Chrysler Cirrus has an advanced 24-valve V6. Its cab-forward design...
Vienna.
The legendary watch dial.
Museo de Arte Contemporaneo, Caracas. Statische Museum für angewandte Kunst, Munich.
Is the design inspiration for the Movado Museum collection of watches.
Victoria and Albert Museum, London.
Movado, the museum watch.
Wherever you are in the United States or in the world, CNN tonight is reporting that it's very likely that the Republican Party will take up to 50 seats in the House of Representatives as they seize control of that body. And CNN is also reporting that it's very likely the Republican Party will take definitive control of the United States Senate. At this point, we still do not know by how much. They have 7 seats right now, and we're watching the races in Washington State and in the state of Minnesota. Joining us now from Washington, co-host of Crossfire, Pat Buchanan, and himself a former presidential candidate. How do you feel?
How does it feel tonight?
How do you feel?
Well, just thinking back on it, when I heard that what Frank say about all those House seats, Bernie, this is the worst defeat sustained by the Democratic Party in an off-year election since 1946 and the coming of the 80th Congress. I think we have a crisis for the Democratic Party. You've got a clear crisis for Bill Clinton, and you got a crisis for American liberalism. This is the party, the philosophy that believes in government activism. The Democrats are the party of government. How do they survive in an environment of populist conservatism where the mood is one of distrust and even detestation of government? I think Bill Clinton's got a tremendous problem on his hands.
Is this an opportunity for your party?
It is, but I will say this. Bill Clinton appears to have forfeited his opportunity to bring together the pro voters into a great new FDR coalition. Republicans have been given the opportunity to do that, but it is by no means a guaranteed thing. The Republican Party is itself divided internally over a variety of issues, with the exception of taxes and big government, where we're all agreed. And I think the working out of this will determine whether the Republican Party's about to begin another 25-year era of domination such as was begun in the 1966 off-year election.
What are you going to do about that to help your party? Are you going to run in 96?
I haven't made any decision on that. My guess is there's a lot more people out on the track as of about 11 o'clock tonight, Bernie, than there were before. You're going to have, I think, 6 or 8 candidates. There's no clear front runner. I think Ross Perot is a very probable third-party candidate. This is very much up in the air as far as the presidential thing is concerned. And you haven't heard the last, incidentally, from former Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North out in Virginia. He has the best mailing list in America. He's got a nationwide following. A lot's going to happen as a consequence of this election, and not simply the crisis in the Democratic Party.
Pat, I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
I want you to think about this question, not as a partisan Republican, but just as an American citizen who, like I, loves this country. 2 years ago, the American voters gave Bill Clinton a mandate for change. He went to Washington. He sought to create change. He had internal problems with his staff. He had external problems. There were questions about his personality, his character, etc. But I don't think anybody can question but that this man and his staff sought what was best for the United States. Tonight, it is clear voters coast to coast in this great country have said, we want a change. Now, Republicans had voted this Democrat to be virtually, or described him as a monster. My question essentially is this: where did he go wrong? What did he do so wrong that was against the American body politic, considering that he loves this country as much as you and I do?
Bill Clinton, first, is no monster. Secondly, I thought he took a tremendous beating when we were up in New Hampshire together. I thought his political skills were greater than he exhibited. I think where he went wrong, Bernie, and I don't understand it, he should have known, or it seemed to me he realized in New Hampshire, that the American people wanted to move in a direction toward traditionalism and social issues and traditionalism and moral values, and they did not want big government activism, the insider deals for tax increases and spending increases. That wasn't the direction they wanted to go. The Perot vote, which came out of the Republican Party, was a clear signal of that. And I thought that's the direction that Bill Clinton would go. Even Newt Gingrich was saying about 2 months into his term, this guy could be another FDR. I don't know what drew him off, if you will, to the left. But I think that was a fatal mistake, if it is a fatal mistake, and I don't think we should say so. We ought to remember 1946 came out into 1948. But that's where he went off the track. I think he may have one chance to try to put this together and govern from the center and build a coalition and see if he gets cooperations. But I think he had an opportunity that's now gone.
Okay, Pat Buchanan, thanks for joining us from the Washington Bureau.
Bernie, I need a clarification. I couldn't hear. What did he say the fatal mistake was that the president made? I think it's important to underline.
Moving to the left.
Just moving to the left, not reaching out a hand to the Republican Party.
Yes. Well, it took me a long time to ask Pat that question because it really goes to the core of emotions and what have you, but he thought that he was creating change. What's your take on that?
In a way, the election of Clinton was the voters saying to this man who was the consummate professional politician, can you make things work? Clinton promised he could make government work. So did Ross Perot. Ross Perot said he could do it because he wasn't a politician. Clinton said he could do it because he was a skillful professional politician. The voters do not seem to have been convinced in the last 2 years that the Democrats can make government work, so they say, we're about to give up on government. That's why they're voting for so many Republicans.
But is 2 years really an adequate amount of time?
We have an impatient electorate, and they don't like what they've seen. They don't believe that this president has been able to deliver.
Well, we've got somebody we're going to put some of these questions to, and that is the White House Chief of Staff, Leon Panetta. He's standing by to join us. Mr. Panetta, thank you for being with us.
Nice to be with you, Judy.
We've got several questions we want to put to you. Number one, it looks like the Democrats have lost control, are losing control, and anyway moved in that direction of the Senate. And CNN is projecting that the Republicans will take control of as many as 50 additional seats in the House of Representatives.
Well, it's obviously a disappointing trend in both the Senate and the House. We're not willing to surrender either at this point. We think we still have a chance with the Senate, particularly if we can win Minnesota, and we'll pick up California and still have a shot in Washington. And in the House, I never give up on the House till I see the numbers coming in from the West.
So even though the projections are out there, you're hanging on till the last minute?
Oh, yeah, always.
Well, what do you say, Leon Panetta, when you hear Pat Buchanan and others who say there is a crisis in the Democratic Party? This change that the voters indicated they wanted 2 years ago has just not been delivered by the White House.
Well, there's no question that the voters tonight were sending the same message they sent 2 years ago, which is that they do want change, and they want change in a much more rapid fashion. Obviously, the president heard that message. We did try to produce change, certainly in terms of the economy, trying to get the deficit down, trying to produce more jobs here in this country. But the people sent a message that they don't like the way Washington does business. They want more to be done to try to clean it up here. And they obviously take it out in the party that's in power. So the president's really got to reach out now and try to work with the Republicans to see if we can, in fact, implement change these next 2 years.
Was the big mistake that I'm quoting Pat Buchanan here, he said the fatal mistake President Clinton made was in not reaching out to the Republicans, was in effect in moving too far to the left?
I think the issue was not so much reaching out to Republicans. After all, the president did reach out to the Republicans. We made an effort on the economic plan, and that was rejected. We made an effort on health care, and that was rejected. We were able to work on the NAFTA treaty, the trade treaty, together. We were able to work on crime and some other issues together. I think the real problem was that we had, obviously, a very ambitious agenda. We couldn't get it all done. I think the public, when they looked at some of the failures that we were not able to achieve, such as health care, they kind of drew a conclusion that things were bottled up here. And I think that in part contributed to the disillusionment that took place, and it was obviously reflected in the vote tonight.
We don't have the final numbers on the Senate, but assuming, or the House for that matter, but assuming the trends continue as they are, the Democrats lose control of both houses, is this president going to be able to get the remainder of his agenda done by the end of his term?
Well, the president's clearly going to reach out on a bipartisan basis to the Republicans. Every one of those elected tonight has to assume the responsibility that goes with that election in helping to lead this country and trying to solve the problems that are there, whether it's in welfare reform, keeping our economic recovery going, some of the political reforms that need to be made. I think those are the issues that the public wants to see change on. And I think the Republicans now are going to have to share some responsibility in trying to deliver on those concerns. They can't simply walk away from it.
All right, Leon Panetta, Chief of Staff at the White House, we thank you for being with us. You mentioned there are several races we're watching, and CNN will continue to keep an eye. Governor, Senate, and House races, a lot to keep an eye on. We'll be right back.
CNN is declaring that George W. Bush has unseated and upset Democratic incumbent Governor Ann Richards in that battle in Texas. The Republicans pick up another state house tonight.
No Texas governor has won a second consecutive term in the last 20 years. And remember, there was another woman on the ballot. She won tonight, the Republican candidate, the incumbent for the Senate seat, Kay Bailey Hutchison.
In the state of Wisconsin, we are declaring Herb Kohl, the incumbent Democratic senator, the winner.
Herb Kohl is a wealthy Democrat, spending a lot of money on his own campaign. His ads have stressed his fiscal conservatism. He's seeking a second term, and he's won it.
Not a surprise in Utah. Orrin Hatch, the incumbent Republican, going back to Washington.
He is seeking his fourth term. He's won it. He's very conservative, but he gets along very well, including with a lot of liberals like Ted Kennedy.
We're going to go to a break right now, so for our local cable stations, we'll be right back right after that with more.
CNN is declaring in California, incumbent Republican Governor Pete Wilson has turned back the challenge by Democrat Kathleen Brown.
And a surprising concession speech, Dan Rostenkowski, longtime former chairman of House Ways and Means, conceding.
I'm grateful. This is a time when I'm going to be able to get home and irritate my wife and my family. I'm going to go to Washington and clean out my desk. And hope that President Clinton will get as much cooperation from the new majority in the Senate and whatever the majority is in the House that they've campaigned on. I think that Mr. Clinton, the President of the United States, has written a tremendous record. I stood with him. I think that health care is something that is going to happen, whether it happens incrementally or whether it will take some time to take effect. But the people in this community are very concerned about crime, and they're concerned about whether or not the government will serve them with a health care provision. And so to you, ladies and gentlemen, that have been supportive, thank you very much. I go now and maybe look for a new...
Well, the former chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Dan Rostenkowski of Illinois, defeated by a virtual nobody in terms of the campaign, 31-year-old Chicago trade lawyer Michael Patrick Flanagan. In Georgia, CNN is calling Newt Gingrich the winner. Well, we're not calling his race now in his district, but this is the way our totals look, with 49% of the people reporting from his district. Mr. Gingrich with 62% to Ben Jones 38%. He joins us now live. What was going through your mind as you heard the words of Dan Rostenkowski conceding defeat to Mr. Flanagan?
Well, Bernie, I think at one level, frankly, real sadness. I mean, Dan Rostenkowski is a man who served his country
for a long time, I think served it as he thought was right. He's a product of a different era and a different time and a different set of rules. But I found in my dealing with him that while he was a liberal Democrat and a big city machine Democrat and we had a lot to argue over, there was a toughness and an integrity in him that I think you had to admire even when you were fighting him. And I think the last 2 years have been very sad ones. I think it was the right decision for Chicago. I'm glad that we have won the seat. But nonetheless, I don't think you can see somebody who has served their country that long ending their career in that kind of situation without a sense of sadness for them as people, as human beings.
CNN is reporting tonight that, quote, very likely, the Republicans will take control of the United States House of Representatives with up to 50 seats. That means that you will be the next Speaker of the House of Representatives.
It's a little bit of an unusual feeling. We're not ready to claim that yet. We want to see some votes out of the West Coast and get a better sense of what's going to happen in Washington State and California. But certainly the trend lines up to right now look like we're clearly going to have a majority. And Bernie, we've talked many times over the years. I can tell you, it is a very sobering and I think a very humbling experience to recognize the potential responsibility for the first time in 40 years to serve as Speaker of the House from a Republican side, and to recognize that it's Speaker of the House, not Speaker of the Republican Party.
You said some very tart things about the Democrats in the run-up to this election night, indications that if you got into control, you would go after the Clintons, you'd go after the White House, the president, you'd order hearings. How much was bluster and how much was intent?
Well, let me say, first of all, I think that Jim Leach and Bill Klinger, who will be the chairman of the Banking Committee and the Government Operations Committee, will have to make decisions about those things, and they should do what they think is ethically and technically correct for the Congress to do. I don't think there should be any sense of either going off on witch hunts, nor should there be any sense of covering anything up. They ought to do the right thing, and as they see it, and they're both honorable men with, I think, impeccable reputations. I think the deeper question is, we have a contract with America. We had 330 candidates sign the contract. We put it in TV Guide as a full-page ad. We told the American people to tear it out, put it on the refrigerator door, and then if we got to be a majority, tune in on January 4th on C-SPAN and watch us keep our word. And the fact is, Bernie, that our first obligation as a party in the House is going to be to actually honor the contract. If the American people have accepted it, and your numbers indicate they will have, then we have an obligation to keep our word. That in itself will be a revolutionary experience for the country to watch a party actually do in detail what it said it would do before the election.
A lot of people are wondering, since you will be the next Speaker of the House of Representatives, if all indications hold up, are you going to moderate your rhetoric in the interest of bipartisanship?
Oh, I think, that when you're a backbencher or you're the minority whip, you have a style that reflects one level of responsibility, and if you become Speaker of the House and you are given the honor of serving the country in that position, and I'd be the first Georgian to do so in 103 years, you really, I think, have an obligation to think through how do you best represent the House and how do you best represent serving the American people on behalf of your colleagues. And I think, clearly, Newt Gingrich or, frankly, anybody else would have to look at that as a very serious and solemn obligation. And I would certainly hope that I could grow into it. And I don't think that Newt Gingrich, Republican whip, is the same behavior pattern in terms of style and speeches and aggressiveness that you'd want to have in the Speaker of the House.
Was that a yes or a no?
I think it's a yes. I mean, maybe I'm too much of a history teacher, but I think it's a yes.
Okay, thank you, Newt Gingrich.
Thanks.
In suburban Atlanta. You're welcome. Judy.
Well, Bernie, while you've been talking to Newt Gingrich, CNN is coming up with some numbers that indicate that it is now very likely that the Republicans will pick up control of the Senate because they have picked up an additional Senate seat from the Democrats. Rick Santorum, we are calling him the winner, defeating the incumbent Democratic senator in Pennsylvania, Harris Wofford.
Only the second incumbent senator to go down to defeat Harris Wofford. This is a very symbolic victory because Wofford's victory in a special election in 1991 presaged Clinton's election, and now Wofford appears to be losing his seat in the Senate.
In Connecticut, CNN is declaring the winner of the gubernatorial race, Republican John Rowland of Waterbury, a former member of the U.S. Congress.
This was a four-way race to succeed Lowell Weicker, who governed Connecticut as an independent. Rowland was a controversial candidate who had some personal difficulties. He appears to have come through.
No winner yet in the state of New York, but a lot of eyes are on this one, the New York governor's race. Mario Cuomo, the incumbent, of course, being challenged by George Pataki, and maybe we're going to see some numbers, and maybe we're not. Yes, we are. Here they come. 48% for Mr. Pataki, 45% for the incumbent, and Tom Golisano, the independent, who was endorsed by Ross Perot, 4%.
This would be a very bitter defeat for Mario Cuomo, who is seeking his 4th term, and it's a bit of a letdown, I think, for if Pataki does win for the mayor of New York City. He's a Republican, Rudy Giuliani. He's going to, if Pataki wins, he'll have a Republican in Albany, but it's a Republican he didn't endorse and whom he does not get along with. We're going to see warfare in the New York Republican Party.
Bush won in Texas tonight. This is how it looks for the other Bush. In Florida's gubernatorial race, with 75% of the precincts in, incumbent Democrat Lawton Chiles holding on with 51% to Jeb Bush's 49%.
If Jeb Bush loses this race, and it's very, very close right now, a lot of people will say he just went too far with an attack ad accusing Chiles of failing to sign a death warrant for a convicted murderer. But Chiles fired right back at him with an aggressive ad saying that it was beyond his control, and a lot of people criticized the Bush ad as unfair.
We're still counting votes in the state just north of Florida. In Georgia, the incumbent Democrat Zell Miller holding on, Bill Schneider.
And he has Bill Clinton around his neck. He was an early supporter of Bill Clinton. The Milner ads,
speaking.
the Milner ads featured that his connection with Clinton very prominently.
All right.
I'm still thinking about what Newt Gingrich said, a different tone. We can talk about that later on.
Oh, yes.
Right now we have to pause, and we'll come back. There's still a lot more. We're not going anywhere. We hope that you won't.
Finally got an answer to your question. No, we're not.
George W. Bush flashing the thumbs up, the smile of victory. He will be the next governor of Texas, his home state. He's unseated the Democratic incumbent Ann Richards. His dad, former President George Herbert Walker Bush, was described by son Jeb as being a nervous wreck last night. We told you that the race in Florida showed incumbent Democrat Lawton Chiles ahead, so the former president apparently can conclude at least one of his 2 competing sons is a winner tonight. Tony Clark, in contrast, is at the headquarters of Ann Richards, also in Austin. Tony?
Bernie, the mood here, I think, is now a realization that it is all over. The crowd has been taking what joy there is in some other Democratic down-ballot Democrat victories tonight. But I think, if anything, there has been surprise at the margin. We've been saying all along this race was going to be a race that was too close to call. The margin was about 10%. Everyone waited for it to close, and it didn't. I'm Tony Clark, CNN, reporting live from the Richards headquarters. Back to the national desk.
Now the next governor of Texas, George W. Bush.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. What Texans can dream, Texans can do. This victory tonight is a great honor. The vote carries with it an awesome responsibility. Texas is ready for a new generation of leadership, and I will provide that.
To the state of California, and to, I believe we're going to the headquarters of Pete Wilson, where we just a few moments ago, even though the polls closed there about 15 minutes ago, we have already declared Pete Wilson, the winner in the governor's race in the state of California. He was being challenged by Democrat Kathleen Brown, the sister of the former governor, or the daughter of the former governor. And now Pat Etheridge is at Pete Wilson's headquarters. And Pat, tell us what the mood is there.
Well, the folks here say no surprises. And joining us here at Pete Wilson headquarters is the governor's campaign manager, George Gordon. George, thanks for being with you tonight. CNN has just called the race for Governor Pete Wilson. Your reaction?
Well, it's a huge win for Pete. It's probably the biggest comeback in California history. We're down 23 points. We come up to win by 10 points. Probably the only person in history to beat a brother-sister act. We're just very, very happy.
Well, what a difference a year makes. As you said, a year ago when Kathleen Brown came out of the gate, she had more than a 20-point lead. How did you turn this thing around?
Well, you know, we concentrated on 3 issues that were really important to California. Jobs, immigration, and crime. And Pete Wilson has a great record on those 3 issues, and we were able to contrast his record with Kathleen Brown's rhetoric, so we're in great shape.
Well, it sounded in the final days of the campaign as if Governor Wilson was campaigning more against President Clinton than he was Kathleen Brown. What are his plans for 1996?
Well, President Clinton made the big mistake to come to California and tell Californians what to do. We soundly rejected the president, and Pete told him so. But Pete is going to be a great governor, and that's what we expect him to be, in spite of what we expect to be a large number of people asking him to do something else.
George Gordon, campaign manager for Pete Wilson, thank you very much for being with us tonight, and we'll be standing by for the victory speech. For now, I'm Pat Etheridge reporting live in Los Angeles.
And from Los Angeles back to Texas, where Ann Richards is conceding.
He deserves Godspeed. That means he deserves our help. Now, I don't want anyone here to feel like they lost a thing. I don't want any of us to go home with anything but a great deal of pride in our hearts. We had a great 4 years. We worked hard. We ran a good race. We have done a lot of good for Texas. This is not the end of the world. It is the end of a campaign.
If you're just joining CNN's live coverage of this election night, the Republican Party is writing another chapter in American political history. To give you an idea of one element of that, we call in our man at the House desk, Frank Sesno.
Bernie, a rising tide lifts all boats, as so they say, and the Republicans are sailing right to victory in the House of Representatives. CNN estimating that the Republicans will take more than enough seats to take control of the House of Representatives for the first time in 40 years. And here's what's interesting. It is cutting across all regions. It is cutting across all ages. It is cutting across literally all the candidates. Let's look at a few. In Illinois 5, the Lion, the powerhouse, Dan Rostenkowski, goes down to defeat. Dan Rostenkowski being defeated by little-known Michael Flanagan, 31-year-old lawyer. Rostenkowski, elected in 1958, checks out in 1994. Let's go over to Pennsylvania in the 13th district. Marjorie Margolis-Mezvinsky, she was a freshman. She cast the decisive vote for the budget and I'm sorry, let me just break in here and go back to Bernie, the national desk, for some more breaking news. Bernie?
Thank you. CNN is declaring an upset in the governorship of New York State. The challenger, George Pataki, the independent now, is the winner over incumbent Democrat Mario Cuomo. Governor Cuomo had served in the state as the head of the state for 12 years as the chief executive. CNN declares George Pataki the winner. You'll recall President Clinton had campaigned on behalf of Governor Cuomo, but apparently it was not enough. Now back to you, Frank.
Well, thanks very much, Bernie. As we were saying about that rising tide, we left off in Pennsylvania 13, where Marjorie Margolis-Mezvinsky, the freshman, locked in a tough race with John Fox. Fox not considered a strong candidate, the Republican. Margolis-Mezvinsky cast the decisive vote for the Clinton budget, but look what's happening. 66% in, Margolis-Mezvinsky back 50 to 44%. Over in Ohio 19, another freshman, Eric Fingerhut. He came in as a reformer. He came in determined to change Washington. If ever there was a poster boy boy for changing Washington and doing things a new way and bringing in all that extra energy. It was Eric Fingerhut, and look what's happening to him. Stu Rothenberg, you've been watching this all night long. Your mouth has been open half the time in amazement because, as you pointed out, this is a watershed election. Each one of these three people represents something very significant.
You bet, Frank, and when you have a bloodbath, this thing happens. All different kinds of incumbents go down, and whether it's an outsider who ran as an outsider, who is now an insider and goes down, or whether it's someone in a Republican district who gets swept away by the wave, they're all going.
Let me jump in here. We're going to go back to the National Desk and Judy Woodruff. Judy?
Thank you, Frank. And we want to go to New York's senator who was not running for re-election tonight, Alphonse D'Amato. Senator D'Amato, you were a big supporter, to say the least, of Mr. Pataki. This must be a sweet night for you.
I think it's a great night for the people in New York. I think they really said enough is enough. They had 12 years of overspending, overtaxing, decline in jobs, a decline in hope and opportunity, a criminal justice system that broke down, and I'm delighted and pleased that they made the kind of change they did. George Pataki will be a great governor.
All right, Senator D'Amato, we'll maybe come back to you a little bit later. Thank you for that. Now to Jeb Bush speaking in Florida.
You have made a difference. You have made a difference. You all have made a difference, and together we will continue to work to advocate these ideas, and I look forward to working with you in the years to come. I want to thank Tom and Ellen Feeney for being by our side. I want to thank my beautiful wife, Columba, and my children for tolerating this mission. And I want to thank the finest group of a campaign organization this state has ever seen. And I thank you all for everything you've done. God bless you all. Thank you very much for your support. Let's keep on working hard to make this state a great state to live. Thank you very much.
We did not hear the beginning of that speech, but it sounded very much, Bernie and Bill, like it. I'm told it was a concession speech on the part of Jeb Bush. The younger Bush brother did not make the governor's chair in Florida. The older Bush brother, George W. Bush, both sons of the former president, the older brother did make it in Texas. This is a mixed night for the Bush family. One win, one loss.
And to use a baseball metaphor for the former president who played a lot of baseball at Yale, the former president is batting .500.
Batting five, not, I suppose you could say that's not bad, but it clearly not a happy night for Jeb Bush. We'll be back with more results, more analysis right after this.
CNN declares a winner in New York. George Pataki upsetting incumbent Mario Cuomo.
A very bitter defeat for Mario Cuomo. Pataki, the hand-picked candidate by Senator Alphonse D'Amato, who was not endorsed by the Republican mayor Rudy Giuliani of New York City.
In Oregon, CNN declares John Kitzhaber the winner, the Democrat in an open seat, turning back a challenge by a couple people, among them Republican Denny Smith of Salem.
Kitzhaber is a physician, and he was the author of Oregon's innovative health care plan, although the plan is also controversial.
That's right. Well, CNN's, we're going to go to a break, and right after that, we hope to, I'm told that Zell Miller, CNN is declaring Zell Miller the winner in the Georgia governor's race, beating back a challenge from the Republican Mr. Milner. And we're going to take a break, and when we come back, perhaps hear from Wolf Blitzer at the White House. We'll be right back.
If you've missed Larry lately, you've missed a lot.
That was quite a campaign here in the state of Georgia. Guy Miller, the incumbent Democrat, will keep his job. I said Guy. I should have said Zell. Another person who will keep his job is the United States Senator from Virginia. Senator Charles Robb joins us. You said when you made your victory statement tonight how sweet it is. What was the sweetest part, aside from the obvious?
Bernie, I guess just the very fact that, as you know, a difficult campaign had been successfully completed. I know you were a Marine and that my two opponents were Marines, so it was not going to be easy. And the fact that everybody came together and lots of people contributed to that victory, and I'm just very grateful to be standing before you as someone privileged to continue to serve my state.
You said lots of people contributed to your victory. Would you include among them Nancy Reagan?
I would. I kidded at the time when I was apprised of her statement, and I hadn't heard about it previously. I just commented, I said, I don't believe I could have said it any better myself. There's no question that she said something that had been articulated, but perhaps less succinctly by other members of the Reagan administration, and I think that did contribute. The fact that my colleague, former Governor Doug Wilder, made his endorsement and then worked very hard to follow through on it was a very positive factor. The fact that I was energized by a little criticism of my Marine record that clearly got my hackles up contributed to it. The fact that a lot of people started focusing on the fact that this wasn't just a protest, but we were going to select somebody to make decisions for us for the next 6 years, and we want to stay in the mainstream.
Okay, I hope you can hear me well, because I want you to really help us out on this. Everybody was watching this race between you and Oliver North, and it was clear that turnout tonight would be absolutely crucial. We know that several weeks ago, it appeared as if you were going to be political toast tonight. So tell us, based on all your exit polls that you've seen and talking with your staff, what did it and where in the state?
Bernie, I can't tell you. I haven't seen any exit polls yet. We were confident that if we could stick to our game plan, and we knew it was 1/4 of the money that Ollie North had, that if we could stick to it and get our message out, that we'd ultimately prevail. I think that's what happened. We had to work hard. We couldn't take any chances, and I was not sure. You mentioned the fact that we had good weather or good turnout. I probably should have included the weatherman. When I saw that we had good weather projected 3 or 4 days out, I started watching the weather very closely. There's no question that a big turnout was beneficial to me, and that ought to be added into the other factors I just mentioned.
Okay, but reality tonight at 11:33 Eastern Time is that you won the battle, but your party has lost the war, not only in the Senate, but in the House of Representatives.
Well, Bernie, there's no question there's going to be a big change. The president called me, and the vice president called me, and the outgoing majority leader called me, and we all talked about the fact that it was going to be different. I do think that there may be a silver lining in this particular cloud, even for Democrats. We had become so polarized, and I would say that it started on the other side, but nonetheless, the perception is that we weren't working together. This will force us to work together, and I think that the ability to tackle some really tough problems requires bipartisanship if you're going to have the confidence of the country, no matter what solutions you come up with. That may be the silver lining, and in terms of the fact that we're now going to be in the minority, and all of us who had or aspired to chairmanships will now be or aspire to be ranking members.
Thank you very much, Senator Robb, for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Bernie.
You're welcome.
And Bernie, while you've been talking to the newly re-elected Senator Chuck Robb, we learned that the man who apparently will be the next Speaker of the House of Representatives, Newt Gingrich, has won his district, the 6th District of Georgia, beating back a challenge from Democrat Ben Jones. Bill.
Well, that's an important victory for Mr. Gingrich. There was a little while where people thought maybe he could go down to defeat as well, but he talked about becoming Speaker of the House, and he insists he'll be Speaker of the whole House, not just the leader of the Republican Party.
And sounding a moderate tone when Bernie interviewed him not too long ago.
In Missouri, no surprise here, incumbent Richard Gephardt has won easily his 3rd congressional district seat. He's going back to Washington.
Yes, but he may not be going back as majority leader in the House. He may be the minority leader. And if Tom Foley is defeated tonight in Washington, we have no indications yet from that race, Richard Gephardt could become the leading Democrat in the next Congress.
And in Florida, we heard Jeb Bush's concession speech a moment ago. Now we're looking at the winner, Lawton Chiles. The Democrat holds on to his second term in running the State House.
And I'll tell you something important about this race. The 8 largest states had races for governor, and this is the only surviving Democrat in all of the 8 largest states in the country. Lawton Chiles in Florida. Richards and Cuomo were defeated.
CNN, USA, election 94. What are they thinking at the White House? Let's call in our senior man there, Wolf Blitzer. Wolf?
Well, Bernie, there's no doubt there's great disappointment here at the White House, but let's get it from the White House press secretary, Dee Dee Myers, who was kind enough to join us here on the North Lawn of the White House. Thank you very much, Dee Dee, for spending some time.
Pleasure.
First question, this looks like the worst case disaster for the White House, losing control of the Senate and probably the House of Representatives.
Well, results are still coming in, but of course we're disappointed. We would have liked to have won a few more of those races out there tonight. We're still watching some of the results coming in and keeping our fingers crossed for people like Senator Dianne Feinstein and Ann Wynia, who's running up in Minnesota. And we'll just have to wait and see what the final results are. But we would have liked to have won more races tonight. I think clearly the American people are disappointed in the state of government generally. I think this is a referendum on Washington and Congress and government generally. And I think the president clearly now will reach out to the Republicans, to the new Republican leaders, should that be the case tomorrow morning, and look towards working together to start rebuilding this country, to reform government, and to get moving forward. It's not about moving right or left. It's about moving forward. That's the president's commitment. I think that's where he'll want to go tomorrow.
The president campaigned very hard for Mario Cuomo in New York State. Looks like George Pataki has now won. This must be a major source of disappointment in New York State.
Well, absolutely. I mean, Governor Cuomo did a wonderful job for 12 years. He was one of the most articulate and impassioned Democrats in the country. His leadership will be missed. I'm sure he won't retreat from public life, however. President Clinton did campaign for him. I think it helped. It was a close race. The governor came from a ways back and almost got over the top. So we were grateful for that, but disappointed in the outcome.
Okay, Dee Dee Myers, thank you very much for spending some time
Wolf.
with us. Now back to the national desk.
Thanks, Wolf. We want to go to Florida now, where Lawton Chiles is making a victory statement.
The Lord always holds back a remnant. He always has a remnant. Many of y'all were our remnant. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for that. With all of that anger and all of that frustration, it took an awful lot for y'all to continue to have the faith and the hope that we could present, that we could take care of our children, we could take care of our schools, putting them in the hands of teachers and parents. I think the 50,000 parents and teachers that we had empowered in our school improvement boards, thank you.
Lawton, go ahead.
No, after you.
Lawton Chiles is making a victory statement, but so many other Democrats tonight are not so happy. Certainly in the governor's races.
Described himself as a remnant. He's the one Democrat in the 8 largest states who remains in office. Pennsylvania turned Republican, New York turned Republican, Texas turned Republican, and Republicans got reelected in Michigan, Ohio, Illinois, and California.
Big states.
Big states.
Big implications for 1996.
You're watching History Tonight as CNN's live coverage continues to bring you the results in this very historic chapter in American politics. And we'll be right back. Well, we're just gaga with what's going on. You wonder, we all have several questions. I wonder what's going through Republican Mayor Rudolph Giuliani's mind, having endorsed Mario Cuomo, who lost tonight to the Republican challenger George Pataki.
I think what's going through his mind is, oh my God, I'm going to have to live with George Pataki in Albany. I endorsed his opponent. Al D'Amato controls the State House. What is going to happen to me and to New York City?
And I'm wondering what's going on in the minds of about, I don't know, a couple of dozen Republicans in the House and the Senate who are going to be moving into chairmanships. Yep. We'll see. Let's go right now to our, speaking of chairmanships, to the House desk and to our own Frank Sesno.
Thanks, Judy. I'm not chairman of anything, but I have been watching these races very closely. CNN now estimating 47 House seats, give or take 5 or so, will fall to the Republicans, giving the Republicans a decisive grip on the House of Representatives for the first time in 40 years. Take a look at this. Going into this election, the Democrats held the clear edge with 256, and now it's a change. The Democrats losing 19. So far, the Republicans picking up 19. The night is still young, though, and what is officially taking place is what you see on your screen. But what CNN is estimating is that this will be a Republican night for the House of Representatives. We've been doing some exit polling, talking to people across the country as they come out from their vote, and you can see what's happening when you ask how does it break down across the age groups. The Democrats lose in every single age group except the youngest voters, 18 to 29, and right there it splits right down the middle. Dan Rostenkowski has already acknowledged his defeat. Jack Brooks in Texas in a very tough race, and out in Washington State, the very earliest results coming in, Tom Foley already behind. We go back to the national desk now.
Thanks very much. And here is Mr. Gephardt of Missouri making his victory statement tonight out there in his state.
And your loyalty, Jane Gephardt and Dick Gephardt, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for this victory tonight.
This guy in the blue
You know,
shirt.
throughout my career, I've met a lot of gifted public servants, but I think we all agree tonight that the finest public servant that we've ever known in the state of Missouri and a national treasure is none other than Tom Eagleton, who introduced you.
From majority leader to minority leader, it looks like Dick Gephardt is going to be changing jobs. Bill?
Well, it depends on whether Tom Foley gets returned to the House. If he goes back to the House, I guess he could be the minority leader for the Democrats.
If he's voted.
But you know, I was struck by something that Senator Charles Robb, who defeated Oliver North tonight, turned back the North challenge, said. He said, because of this change in the Senate, because of this change in the House, the apparent change, this will force us to work together.
Well, I think the American people were actually sending a message, and it wasn't a partisan message. They voted for a Democrat for the president. Now they voted for Republican Congress. Could the American people be saying, we want bipartisanship, we want to put an end to partisanship? That could be the message in the election returns from 1992 and 1994. Please work together. Democratic president, Republican Congress. Get something done.
All right.
We heard from Frank Sesno in the House. Now, Bruce Morton, very busy man at our Senate desk. How does it look?
Bernie, it looks transformed. You know, when the British surrendered to the Americans at the end of the Revolution, the band, according to the history books, played a tune called The World Turned Upside Down. And if I knew the melody, I'd try to whistle it. When we started, just to sort of sum up how this evening has gone, out of the 100 Senate seats, the Republicans had just 44, needed to gain 7 in order to take control. Here is where we stand now. A net gain of 8 for them, 5 undecided. There are still some of those that could go either way. But if nothing changes, they will have control and a little margin to spare. We can talk later about who all the committee chairmen will be. My personal favorite is Strom Thurmond, who will celebrate his 92nd birthday next month, who's been in the Senate since the 1950s and will be chairman of the Armed Services Committee. So much for term limits. Back to the national desk.
A lot to talk about there with those changeovers and those committee heads.
Chairman Jesse Helms of North Carolina, Republican chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
Foreign Relations Committee.
And don't forget that the Republicans have considered themselves a tyrannized minority in the House of Representatives for 40 years, shut out of power, and far less powerful as a minority in the House than the Republican minority has been in the Senate. They are coming back to power, and this is going to be an enormous change in Washington.
I could just imagine. Can you imagine all the patronage jobs in Washington? Suddenly you'll have Republican elevator operators instead of Democratic.
Is that really the way it's done, Bernie?
Oh, wait a minute. They have a contract with America, and they say in the first 100 days they're going to change the way Congress works, so we'll be watching.
Yep.
All right, we talked about the world turned upside down in the Senate. In the governor's races this year, the world is turned upside down. Let's go to Jean Meserve at the governor's desk.
It's happening in the House, it's happening in the Senate, it is happening in the governorships too. Republicans are giving Democrats eviction notices from governors' mansions all over the country. Going into this election, Democrats held 29 governorships. Republicans had 20. One was independent. And look at how things have changed now. When we look at these new numbers, we see the Republicans have picked up 10 governorships. They only needed 6 for a majority. They've knocked off incumbents in New Mexico, New York, and Texas. They held on to that big state of California. The only bright light for the Democrats at this point is Florida, where Lawton Chiles has held on to that governorship. The sands are shifting indeed, and they are shifting right out from under the Democrats' feet. Back to the national desk.
Some big changes. Big changes. Yep. We're all keeping an eye tonight on these very important races in the House, Senate, and the governors, but across the country, dozens and dozens of so-called initiatives, ballot measures, were there for voters to consider. In Oregon, voters considered a ballot measure that allows terminally ill people to obtain lethal medications. And we look at the results here at this hour. This is 120,000 voting for, 113,000 against the so-called assisted suicide measure.
A very divisive issue with a lot of religious voters protesting that this kind of power should not be left in the hands of doctors and individuals. It belongs to God.
That's right. This ballot measure 16 does allow doctors to prescribe a fatal dose of painkillers, but only after a waiting period and a second medical opinion. Supporters had argued that the measure, which will be the first of its kind in the nation, will let doctors end unbearable pain.
There's a lot going on, as you see at the bottom of your screen. Throughout this evening, we're going to be showing you a lot of what's still to come in these closing states where the polls close. The hot-button abortion issue appeared on only one state ballot this election day. Initiative number 1 in Wyoming proposes to ban the procedure except in cases of rape, incest, or endangerment of the mother's life. Here's how the tally is shaping up at this hour.
Big setback for the anti-abortion movement in Wyoming.
And looking on, the national movement to limit term limits, to limit how long members of Congress and other elected officials may serve, may be gaining momentum tonight. Here's a look at the term limit measures that have passed so far. In Nevada, it was question 8. We're calling it passed with a 71% vote. And let's see if we have any other states where the result. And from Maine, it was question 1. It's passed there as well with 63% of the vote. In Nebraska, Measure 408, it passed again, 67% of the vote. And we're going to move in here. We're going to interrupt our look at these ballot measures to go to Patrick Kennedy, the son of Edward Kennedy, his speech in Rhode Island, running for Congress.
Without your friendship, tonight would not have been possible. Thank you, Mount Pleasant. We would not be celebrating a victory tonight if it were not for the untiring work of so many of you in this room. I want to thank my staff, the volunteers, my family, and my colleagues in the legislature and local government for all the help that each one of you have given to me and to this campaign. Thank you, each one of you, for being here tonight. I'd like to congratulate my opponent, Kevin Vigilante, for a well-fought campaign. Though we disagreed on much, we shared a common faith in Rhode Island and a common optimism about the future of our state. During the past few months, I've had the honor and privilege of meeting and talking with thousands of my fellow Rhode Islanders. From the Blackstone Valley to Aquidneck Island, I heard the same concerns about the future of our state. From senior citizens to factory floors, I felt the same uncertainties. But I also saw a determination to seize the future and to make Rhode Island a better place to live. I look forward to working in the years ahead, to listening to you, and to making sure that your voice is heard in Washington, D.C.
Mother Joan Kennedy standing behind Patrick Kennedy, who's accepting his victory speech, a House seat in Rhode Island, now to Mario Cuomo, who has lost his bid to be reelected to a 4th term of governor of the state of New York.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. I'm sorry we kept you so long, but it was a close race and a complicated one, and we had to make sure you got your money's worth. But I've been trying to get hold of George Pataki for the last 10 minutes or so. I'm sure by now he has the message. What I wanted to do personally, but what I will do right now is congratulate George Pataki and Libby. No, please. No. It was indeed a long and a tough struggle. George Pataki is the next governor of the state of New York. We will all respect him. We will work with him. I congratulate him and Libby and his family, and I'm sure that you want to do the same. And now, please, don't spoil it. You are the classiest group in America, and don't you ever spoil it. Let me as briefly as I can, and I'm afraid I will leave people out, but there are some thank yous I have to make specifically to the members of my family: Matilda, Margaret, Howard, Andrew, Kerry, Maria, Ken, Madeline and Brian, Chris, my brother Frankie, my sister Marie, Joan, and Ted, who even when they might have preferred for me to return to private life, sacrificed so much and worked so hard over and over so that I could have the opportunity to serve. To the greatest Lieutenant Governor...
If you're just joining us, Mario Cuomo, the Democratic governor of New York, has been roundly defeated by the Republican challenger George Pataki. Our live coverage of this fascinating, historic election tonight will continue in a moment. Washington, D.C., Marion Barry being challenged by Republican Carol Schwartz. Barry making a statement now.
Brought me across September 13th, the same grace on November the 8th. Isn't it amazing what we can do? We talk together, walk together, plan together, work together, pray together, and vote together to build our city. Isn't it amazing when we see that we are more alike than different? My friends here in Washington, indeed, it's amazing. Yeah. Yes, it is. We have dreamed the impossible dream and made the impossible possible. Yes. We have taken mountains that were in our way and removed those mountains. Yeah. We have come together as never before. But in coming together, now is not the time to gloat in our success and our victory. Yeah. Or be cynical or negative in our defeat. That's right. Now is the time to build bridges together and help me rebuild Washington together.
Marion Barry, who was former mayor of Washington, D.C., who was convicted of drug possession and spent time in prison. Bill, he's won re-election. CNN is calling.
As he was expected to do. That's an overwhelmingly Democratic city. The point was that when he won the primary, there was a very racially polarized vote. He got almost no white votes. Well, this time, his Republican opponent, Carol Schwartz, appears to have cut very heavily into the African-American vote in Washington. She's doing extraordinarily well. Many more votes than you would expect from just the white community's support alone.
That's a city with a very small Republican registered vote number of registered Republican voters, and yet, as we just saw, she got 44% of the vote.
To all our viewers in the United States, around the world, don't go away. We're coming up at the top of the hour. The Republican Party is pulling off a deluge in the House and in the Senate. Judy, Bill, and I, and the rest of our colleagues will tell you all about it right after this local cable station break.
CNN calls a winner in the South Carolina governor's race. He is David Beasley, the Republican. That means the GOP holds on to that seat.
A very important victory for Christian conservatives who lost their candidate in Virginia, Oliver North. Beasley was elected to South Carolina into the House as a Democrat when he was in college, rose in ranks to become the youngest Speaker pro tem and majority leader in any state legislature, switched to the Republican Party, and is a leader in the Christian conservative movement around the country.
Taking you out into the far Pacific, CNN declares that Daniel Akaka, the Democratic incumbent, has won, turning back a challenge from the rancher out there, 76-year-old Maria Hustis. He is going back to Washington.
This was a safe Democratic seat. He's a native Hawaiian. He's finishing the term of the late Senator Spark Matsunaga. He's now running for his first full term in the Senate.
We should note that it's after midnight now, and the polls have closed in all 50 states. At midnight, they close, Eastern time anyway, they close in the state of Alaska.
So if you think you've had a lot of information, you haven't seen or heard anything yet. Republicans from coast to coast, and certainly those in the Senate and the House, those who ran tonight, are singing happy days are here again, because Bruce Morton, who's at the Senate desk, is going to help us give you an idea of how the Senate committees in Washington will shape up. Bruce?
Well, Bernie, the fact is the Senate is virtually certain to be Republican. I can't think of anything that could happen now. We've declared so many races that could turn that around. So take a look. The Banking Committee will be chaired by Senator Alphonse D'Amato of New York, whom we've seen on the air this evening. You can bet there will be aggressive Whitewater hearings, because that's a favorite cause of his. John Chafee of Rhode Island gets Environment. Bob Packwood gets the Finance Committee, which he chaired the last time the Republicans had the Senate. William Roth of Delaware, who was reelected tonight, gets Government Affairs. Strom Thurmond, as I mentioned a while ago, gets Armed Services. Jesse Helms of North Carolina gets the Foreign Relations Committee. There'll be a big change of tone there, a lot less welcome for the United Nations, for instance. What really happens legislatively may not change that much, Bernie, because as we all learned these last 2 years, now that everything, including the reading of the minutes, gets filibustered, you need 60 votes to get anything through the United States Senate. Mr. Clinton didn't have those last time. The Republicans won't have those this time. But what will change is the tone, the agenda of the debate. They'll be arguing about what defense programs to increase, not how to spend the peace dividend, things like that. And I think the other thing that's happened is a lot of the new Republicans are very conservative Republicans. Fred Thompson in Tennessee campaigned limit congressional sessions to 6 months, cut their pay and send them home. Bill Frist, the other new Tennessee Republican, very conservative. Jim Inhofe out west. So the whole Republican caucus is going to be more conservative than it was, and that's going to push Majority Leader, as we assume he'll be, Bob Dole, to the right. The whole tone of the debate is going to move, I think.
Bruce, I'm looking at the list here, and what really, two things surprised me. First of all, the new chairman of the Labor Committee will be the senator from Kansas, the junior senator from Kansas, Nancy Landon Kassebaum. And I'm really surprised that as you look at the Agriculture Committee, Richard Lugar of Indiana, who's been a stalwart on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, now becomes chairman of Senate Agriculture.
Well, seniority rules, as you know, Bernie, and that's just the way the numbers come out.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Bruce Morton at the Senate desk. We can't say it enough. This has been an absolutely politically gaga night. Another chapter in American political history.
But you notice from the White House, we heard conciliatory sounds. Of course, they have very little choice. They have to live with the Republican Congress. But from when we talked to Bob Dole and when you interviewed Newt Gingrich, they weren't sounding angry and combative. We're going to stop everything President Clinton wants to do. We heard a little bit of a new Newt, so to speak. He said he intends to be Speaker of the whole House, not just the spokesman for the Republican Party. So there's a sense of perhaps maybe a glimmer of bipartisanship coming out of the Republican Congress.
You don't suppose that the message the voters were sending may have gotten through to the Republicans and the Democrats in Washington?
Well, I think it certainly got through to the Republicans. And I think Dee Dee Myers of the White House, the president's press spokeswoman, indicated that it got through to the Democrats. She said it's clear that the American people want to see some change in her interview with Wolf Blitzer. And I think the Republicans realize that if they don't produce over the next 2 years, guess what? The voters will come back and do it again. I've always maintained the American voters are in such a surly mood. They know they're the consumers. They want to see action. If they don't get it, they'll go to the polls. They'll do again what they did tonight.
CNN's Brooks Jackson has been taking a look not just tonight, but for the last number of weeks and even longer at how much money is being spent in some of these campaigns. Tonight, right now, he's going to talk to us about some of the so-called millionaire candidates. Brooks?
That's right, Judy. And first, for all the talk we've heard of change tonight and the desire for change and the big changes we're seeing, in one sense, it's been business as usual tonight. 31 Senate races, by my count, have been declared so far. In every one of those Senate races, except two, the person who spent the most money got the most votes. The exceptions are Ollie North, of course, in Virginia, spent $20 million and lost, even though he outspent Chuck Robb by about 4-1. And in Tennessee, Jim Cooper marginally outspent Fred Thomas, $3.5 million to $3 million, and yet Mr. Cooper lost. His campaign was fueled by a lot of money from healthcare interests, which were interested in his more moderate version of health reform in the House. The Senate remains a millionaire's club, but not every millionaire can get in, we've seen tonight. Those winning include Herb Kohl of Wisconsin, who spent $6 million of his own money to win re-election. Very seldom do you see millionaires spending a lot of money out of their own pocket to win the second time, to run the second time, but Senator Kohl has done it. Frank Lautenberg, $900,000 to help him hold on to his seat in New Jersey. But look at some of the millionaires who lost. Mitt Romney in Massachusetts spent $3.6 million losing to Ted Kennedy. Richard Fisher, $2 million in Texas, losing there. And we could go down the list a little bit, but a lot of personal money went into losing races tonight. Back to the national desk.
Thank you very much, Brooks. CNN is ready now to call a race in Washington State. Incumbent Republican Senator Slade Gorton, no, he's not. He's 66 years old. He's the incumbent. He has beat back a strong challenge from Rod Sims, the 46-year-old African-American council member in Seattle. President Clinton had campaigned out there.
Yes, and this looked like one of the few Republican seats that might go Democratic. He was elected in 1980, lost in 1986, then was elected again in 1988, and seeking his second consecutive term.
And with that call, that means the Republicans will definitely have control of the Senate. They have now picked up enough seats so that even if they lost a seat somewhere else, they would still have control of the Senate. So it's now official.
This is official. The Republicans will be the majority party in the new Senate. President Clinton is going to have to live with a Republican Senate and possibly also a Republican House. The cynics would say this was a vote for gridlock, but I think it's easier to say, and the data point to the conclusion that it was a vote for bipartisanship, for centrism. People want to see the Democrats and Republicans cooperating. They haven't seen much cooperation between a Democratic president and a Democratic Congress, so I'm not sure they see it's going to make a great deal of difference when the Republicans come in.
All right, another Senate seat we're keeping a close eye on is that in California. Dianne Feinstein, CNN's Greg Lefebvre, is at Feinstein headquarters in San Francisco. Greg?
Well, Judy, the mood here is not as bright as it was earlier this evening. The question around here is, does money talk? And apparently in California it does. By a vote, some would say, of 28 to 14. That is $28 million to $14. $28 million to $14 million. Mike Huffington, the Republican challenger, is giving Dianne Feinstein a run for her money here tonight in California. The exit polls show one thing. The count currently is showing something else. It's a very tense night here up north in California, and we will stay with it. Back to you, Judy.
All right, Greg. Talking about money, we were just hearing from Brooks Jackson just before this. How much money was spent in this race? I mean, between the Republican and the Democrat?
Well, California's a big state with incredibly expensive television markets, and Michael Huffington got out there fast and said he'd spend whatever it takes.
This is what we have so far, with just 3% of the precincts reporting. This is very, very fragmentary.
What, 30 million? Was that the number? I stumbled. I can't get it out. $30 million. And Dianne Feinstein, I believe she took out a second or a third mortgage on her home. Second mortgage on her home.
And she doesn't exactly come from a poor family herself.
She doesn't exactly come from a poor family. Her husband is a well-to-do real estate developer,
That's
I believe.
Exactly.
And of course, we don't go anywhere unless and until we report all the important races. Clearly, this one in California, one of them. Our live coverage will continue in a moment.
CNN's
modern fleets and warm hospitality. Just a few of the things that make Asiana the jewel of Asia.
Hey, mister, your hardware's looking real good.
CNN now takes a look at undeclared races in Minnesota, where Ann Winia, the Democrat, was the Democratic Party's hope for a comeback here. We're not declaring anything, 50% of the precincts in.
This is probably the only remaining chance for the Democrats to pick up a Senate seat from the Republicans in Minnesota.
A very interesting race underway at this hour in Nevada, the Senate race in Nevada. We can't call it, so we're going to come back to that in a minute. We're going to go to the Arizona governor's race, where, as you see, Fife Symington holding on so far, 21% of the vote in, 55% to Mr. Bash's 42%.
Symington was considered an endangered Republican governor because of his personal financial woes, but looks like he's doing pretty well.
What's happening in Maryland in that gubernatorial race? Well, with 99% of the precincts in, look at this. Too close to call.
This was a big surprise. Maryland's a very Democratic state. Ellen Sauerbrey ran on one theme: tax cuts, tax cuts, tax cuts. She is anti-abortion. She was critical of gun control, and people thought she was probably a dead duck in Maryland. But look at that.
Alabama governor. This is a close one. Look at this. The Republican looks to be ahead at this hour. 76% of the vote in. The Republican, Fob James, ahead of Jim Folsom by, well, it's 50-50, Bill.
It's an interesting race. Folsom's father was governor of Alabama, and Fob James was a Democrat who switched to the Republicans in 72 and back to the Democrats in 78, and was a former governor himself as a Democrat. Now he's running as a Republican.
Look at this. With 24% of precincts in, CNN is declaring a winner in the race here. The Democrats apparently are going to keep this one.
That's right. That's Bob Miller, who's seeking his second full term. He became acting governor after Governor Bryan was elected to the Senate.
And in the governor's race in the state of Idaho, we don't have a winner yet, but we're looking at Mr. Batt, the Republican, 51%. Larry Echohawk, Native American, 45%.
Yes, Larry Echohawk would be the first Native American governor. He's a Democrat and a Mormon. He's the Attorney General. The Democrats have not lost the governorship in Idaho since 1966, almost 30 years.
You know, so much going on. I just wanted to observe that in that Maryland gubernatorial race, Paris Glendening is trailing. Glendenning's running mate is
a Kennedy.
None other than
Kathleen Kennedy Townsend.
Let's check. Oh, indeed.
We're an echo.
The House of Representatives will not be the same tomorrow morning, and certainly not in the 104th Congress. Frank Sesno is watching that very closely.
Bernie, guess who's thinking about being Speaker of the House? It's Newt Gingrich tonight. Let's take a look at why. First of all, some of the powerhouses are in very desperate trouble. Out in the state of Washington, the current Speaker of the House, with 22% of the vote in now, Tom Foley, is well behind the challenger, George Nethercutt, 53% to Nethercutt, for Nethercutt to 47% for Foley. Foley, a 15-term Democrat. He felt the anti-incumbent lash very personally, or so it seems. Onward to Illinois now, another lion of the Democratic Party falling to this wave of republicanism tonight. Dan Rostenkowski losing despite what you see there, some confusing numbers there. But Michael Flanagan has won, and Mr. Rostenkowski has conceded in Chicago, where tonight the sound was of the changing of the guard.
I hope that Mr. Flanagan will endeavor to serve this congressional district as I have tried to serve it.
I got off the phone just a few minutes ago with a class act, with a gracious man, with a very, very, very wonderful human being. I talked with Representative Rostenkowski for just a few minutes, but he wished me well. He congratulated the people of the district, and he wishes none of that, and he wishes us all well. And I think we owe him a hand for many years of good service.
And to North Carolina, where another veteran Democrat is in deep trouble with 80% of the vote in. Charlie Rose, 50-50. Look at that, about 500 votes separating him from Robert Anderson, who in the world of politics is a virtual nobody. Stuart Rothenberg, we've been looking at this. Let's put this in some historical perspective. Going into tonight's election, the Republicans had a majority delegation, congressional delegation in the South, only in Florida. As of right now, we can say that they have majority delegations in Georgia, in South Carolina, in North Carolina, and in Tennessee.
Yeah, it's a sea change. It's not just freshmen, not just old-timers, not just in the South. It's across the country. It's some old bulls who we wouldn't have expected to lose, and it's some surprises that we're going to see over the next couple of hours as well.
Over the next couple of hours, and we're going to be watching very closely, especially out on the West Coast, of course. Back to the national desk.
Thank you, Frank. We've got some fresh information from exit polls, and Bill Schneider's going to share that with us. Bill?
We're going to look at the state of California, where Pete Wilson has been reelected as the governor. And here's something extraordinary in California. In California, 61% of the voters said the state economy isn't good, but look at what they did. They voted to re-elect Pete Wilson, those who said the economy isn't good in California, as most did. Now, why did they elect Pete Wilson? The top issue in California was crime, and there he led Kathleen Brown, the Democratic challenger, by better than 2-1. Another top issue was immigration. He ran hard as a supporter of the anti-illegal immigration referendum, and there, too, he had a very strong lead over Kathleen Brown. Now, we asked people in the California Senate race, which was a very expensive race, who spent too much money. And the answer was half the voters said they both did, and both candidates shared the blame for that. Who attacked the other candidate unfairly in the California race? It was a bitter campaign, and the voters said both candidates were at fault. The top issue in that California Senate race, however, experience, cited by over a quarter of the voters, and that separates the two candidates. It works heavily in Feinstein's favor. If she wins this Senate race in California tonight, it'll be because the voters in California were looking for the candidate with experience. That was Dianne Feinstein.
I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, but as you know, we're just a fraction of the CNN news team worldwide, and certainly here in the United States, and certainly on this election night. We all work very hard for the common good, your good, to provide information. Bob Fernand, the executive producer of this broadcast, a couple days ago handed me this piece of paper, and he said, you and Judy might want to use this tonight, election night. I'll just quote from you what it says. This is a newspaper column. Former President Richard Nixon predicts that the GOP will pick up 7 seats in the Senate and 25 in the House in the 1994 congressional elections, enough to give Republicans control of the Senate and to ensure their highest total in the House in 40 years. Of course, this was before the former president passed away.
Not bad. He's been known for some good political picks, and this is another one.
There's much more to come on CNN's live coverage. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Looking at some propositions and other ballot issues, Proposition 187, the very controversial one in California, which would virtually cut off all public services except emergency medical care to illegal immigrants.
That proposition is very strongly ahead right now. It had been slipping in the polls, and that might be the reason why Pete Wilson was reelected. He ran hard on this issue. Kathleen Brown hoped that she could ride opposition to it to a victory. Like Prop 13 in California in 1978, this kind of proposition is something that could spread all over the country.
Just north in the state of Oregon, the so-called right to die assisted suicide ballot measure number 16. Right now, it is running very close. Yes, 51, no, 49, Bill.
I think those vote totals show us exactly how divisive and controversial this measure is.
Okay, looking at the so-called gay rights laws considered in Idaho and Oregon. In Idaho, it's Proposition number 1, and this is the way it's stacking up.
This would ban localities from passing laws that prohibit discrimination against homosexuals, and we see in Idaho and in Oregon. In both states, it is failing. This is, in both states, a victory for the gay rights movement.
And this is how it looks in Oregon, too.
On this night of seismic political change, Rick Santorum, Republican Senate winner in Pennsylvania.
And I think we should give a hand for the new governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Ridge. You folks worked hard. You folks worked hard.
That was Rick Santorum, as we said, upset winner over Harris Wofford, the Democratic incumbent. Let's talk about the balance of power in the United States Senate and to CNN's own Bruce Morton. Mr. Morton.
Judy, well, you couldn't have a balance tilt much more in the course of one evening than this. Just to sum it all up quickly, here's the way the Senate looked at the beginning of this election day. 56 Democrats, 44 Republicans. They needed 7. By now, they've done better than that. They've gained 8. There are only 2 seats still undecided, and the Republicans are essentially certain to have control of the new Senate with all of the changes in style and tone and agenda that will mean. Back to the national desk.
Thank you, Bruce.
There's going to be a big debate over who claims credit. You're going to be seeing everybody, Christian conservatives, parole voters, the gun lobby, anti-abortion movement, the Republican Party. Everybody's going to say, we did it, we did it, we did it. Well, they're going to share the credit because they all had a hand in it.
And, of course, the question on the voters' mind will be, will they, can they govern?
And is it going to be different?
Yeah, Frank Sesno is at the House desk. Excuse me, Judy.
Go ahead.
Well, Bernie and Judy, I guarantee you it's going to be different, certainly in the House of Representatives. Coming into this election, of course, the Democrats firmly controlled the lower chamber as they had for the last 4 decades. But tonight, it's been entirely different. The Democrats losing their 256 to 178 edge. There are 113 seats undecided, but already a net change of 28 seats going into the Republicans' column. And CNN is estimating that the Republicans will have no trouble gaining control of the House of Representatives. One quick point here: we took aside those races across the country, House races, where the where the Christian Coalition had weighed in. So far, of those 11 races we identified, all 11 are going toward the Republicans. Back to the national desk.
All right, in all this good news for the Republicans, there are a few rays of sunshine for the Democrats. In the state of Hawaii, CNN is saying that the Democrats will hold on to the Hawaii governor's seat. Ben Cayetano, who was the lieutenant governor, won that race.
That was a 3-way race, and he was in some danger. It's a very Democratic state, but Frank Fozzie, the mayor of Honolulu, is a former Democrat, and he was running also on that ticket. So the Democrats really won a difficult victory in Hawaii. Pat Saiki, the Republican candidate of Japanese ancestry, was very, very strong.
The Republican Party tonight weaving the thread of victory from the Senate to the House of Representatives and out to the state houses. Jane Meserve has been watching all this. She's been very busy, as has been Frank Sesno and Bruce Morton. Jane, tell us about this changing picture at the State House.
Well, this tectonic shift in political affairs is indeed extending to the governorship. The Democrats can feel the earth moving out from underneath their feet. Going into this election, the Democrats held 29 state houses. The Republicans had 20, and there was 1 independent. The Republicans have picked up 10 by our count. They only needed 6 for a majority. They have won all the big states except Florida. That gives them a big leg up for the 96 presidential election. There's one race that's still outstanding that we want to take a look at, and that's the state of Maine. This race is not between a Democrat and a Republican, although there is a Republican trailing in the race. It's between Democrats and independents. Right now we're going to go to New York and the winner of the New York governor's race.
Thank you. Let me say, No, we are going. I appreciate the sentiment, but let me say that we are going to begin a new positive era for the people of this state. Be happy. Tonight, we won a victory for all New York. Thank you so much. And you won us.
George Pataki, the upset winner in the state of New York, Mario Cuomo, had appeared to have an edge going into the polls today. And now we go back to the national desk.
That was a big upset for the Republicans. We've got a lot to talk about. Governors, House, and Senate. The numbers keep pouring in. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
And I'll dry my hand with spilled coffee down there.
Is that what happened?
Yeah. CNN sees a winner in that Nevada Senate race. It looks like the incumbent, 57-year-old Richard Bryan, will be going back to Washington. Bryan from Las Vegas beating back the challenge by the Republican Hal Furman of Las Vegas.
Yep, this was a race that they were getting a little bit nervous about, but it looks like the incumbent has managed to pull through. The war on the West was an issue in this race, but the Democrats survived.
Bill, you've got some numbers on what it looks like nationally in terms of explaining this big change in the House of Representatives.
Well, Judy, let's see what's behind it. We found in our exit poll that only 44% of the voters nationwide approve of the job President Clinton is doing, 51% disapprove, and among those who disapproved, it was a huge margin. 84% of them voted Republican for the House of Representatives. So it appears that Clinton was clearly a drag on the House candidates in his party. Now, Ross Perot on Larry King Live a few weeks ago told his supporters he wanted them to vote for Republicans for Congress, to give the Republican Party what he regards as their last chance. And what did they do? They followed his orders 2-1. The Perot supporters from the 1992 election went Republican over Democratic in voting for the House of Representatives. Finally, Perot says he's the leader of the independents. Well, independents voted Republican 57-43 over Democrats. We rarely see this. In every House election I can remember, independent voters voted majority for the Democrats. This time they've switched. If Ross Perot wants to fashion himself the leader of the independents, remember his message was, we're going to give the Republicans one chance. This is their last chance to see if they can govern from Congress. And if they can't do what they promised to do, Ross Perot says he's going to form a third party of those independents.
You said a minute ago Ross Perot was one of those who's going to be trying to take credit, and what you're saying is he can take some credit.
He can take some credit for this.
Rhode Island governor's race, Bernie, I'm hearing we have a result in. Let's look and see. Lincoln Almond, an open seat. This is a pickup for the Republicans. More good news, Bill Schneider, for the Republicans and the governors.
Lincoln Almond is a moderate Republican. His opponent was a liberal woman candidate, Mirth York. The Democratic incumbent governor of Rhode Island, Bruce Sunland, was defeated by York in the primary. He had gotten into a lot of personal problems, and it's pretty clear that Lincoln Almond was the candidate of change and also got the moderate vote in that heavily Democratic state.
Now, if you have been wowed by all of this historic political news, think about the hardworking people who were the brains behind our coverage. I'm going to go downstairs and check on our political director, Tom Hannon, and Chris Carino of our political unit, and Karen Dessauer, to see if these folks are still alive. It's quite a night. We're not going anywhere. Please don't you. When we come back after this commercial break, the Capitol Gang.
Welcome to Washington. This is the Capitol Gang, and I am Al Hunt. Mark Shields, it's been an extraordinary night for the Republicans. We've heard a lot about the taking over the Senate to pick up apparently of about 8 seats. The governorships are obviously terribly important. They're going to pick up a net gain of 10, control 8 of the top 10. But it seems to me far and away the most important story is for the first time in 40 years they're going to control the House.
I guess you're right, Al. It is. I mean, it is truly historic. I mean, there's only one person on this panel who was even alive when the Republicans was Robert D. Novak. It's been 40 years. I mean, it's almost been a permanent arrangement in Washington. Bob Michael is retired this year as Republican leader. He never served in a majority.
38 years, I think.
38 years. It is truly historic.
He was well fitted to be in the minority, and I think Newt Gingrich is well fitted to be in the majority. I think the interesting thing about Newt Gingrich is as long as we're not going to have the joy of Ollie North in the Senate, and perhaps we won't have Margaret's favorite Michael Huffington in the Senate, to the person who is most obnoxious to political correctness in this city will be Newt Gingrich. He will drive you nuts because he believes in things. He believes in forcing things. He's not going to be a sit-down leader as most of the Republican leaders have been, including the ones I remember when the Republicans did control the House. They're going to have some very tough action programs. It's going to be a very lively time in the House of Representatives. Everybody says, well, they won't do anything. I think they're going to do a lot, and I think they're going to have some very, very sweeping tax legislation, which is going to prove a problem for President Clinton.
It's going to prove a problem because they're going to cut taxes, Margaret, for the rich people, and that's going to be a problem for Bill Clinton, huh?
Well, I want to defer to Gramps here on this historic moment, but Newt Gingrich is going to have to learn how to lead now, and he's going to have to temper this personality of his, which is combative and good on the outside, but may not necessarily, he's going to have to grow into leadership. I mean, he touched bottom over the weekend when he blamed Democrats for Susan Smith killing her 2 children.
Didn't seem to bother the voters, did it?
Well, I think voters didn't know or voted.
They didn't know. The press was screaming about it all weekend.
I
the
think
Democrats.
You usually think it was news. He said that, don't you,
He
Bob?
won despite
Bob, you do think it's news that he said that, don't
Margaret,
you?
yeah, but it wasn't the end of the earth, and it certainly wasn't anything that I mean, I heard so much speculation this was going to affect the election.
Let's let Mona get in.
Well, contrary to what Margaret said, I think actually that the danger now is that the country, having spoken very loudly, saying that we want the end of business as usual in Washington, and I think this is really an expression of the fermenting discontent about the state of the culture, about crime. I think crime was a very important issue in a lot of these races. But that much having been done, I think that there's a danger Republicans in power will get fearful, will say, well, we don't want to seem like the party of the religious right. They may not be bold enough for what the electorate has been demanding. And that's a danger that I don't think is going to be talked about in the next few days, but it's a real one.
Mark Shields, let's stay on Newt Gingrich for a second, and I'd like you to give your view as to whether he's the person for the times, whether he's the person that can...
There's no question that Newt Gingrich was able to persuade a lot of Republicans who had accepted their minority status as a condition, a permanent condition, that they could do something about it. Now, as an insurgent, one does things that are provocative, that get headlines, that get attention. I could not agree more than with Margaret in her statement about what he said about Susan Smith. I mean, it is excessive, it is wrong, it is offensive, it is absolutely inaccurate.
Just in case people don't know.
Yeah, all right. Susan Smith is the woman in South Carolina, Union, South Carolina, who has confessed to the authorities to infanticide, which is about as horrendous a crime as one can imagine. And Newt Gingrich over the week equated this to the Democratic climate, and that if one wanted to change this climate, one had to vote Republican.
Let me just say.
No, because I want to change the subject just for a second. I want to stay on it, but basically we have talked now about, what this is going to mean. We talked about what is going to happen. What is the House going to do? I mean, Bob, you briefly mentioned the taxes. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I'm just going to say it's briefly in Washington that we've just had the first Republican victory of the House of Representatives in 40 years, and we're dwelling on a few words that Gingrich said before.
I'm asking you to tell us what's going to happen.
I'm just saying I think it's stupid to be dwelling on that. In first place, let me say that the House Majority Leader is going to be Dick Armey in all probability. This is going to be the first time in the history of the country that you have had a Speaker and a Majority Leader who not only are both PhDs, not too many of your hack Democrats have PhDs, I would say, but people who actually believe in something. And what they're going to be pushing very hard is real welfare reform, not phony welfare reform that costs more. There's going to be a cut in the capital gains tax. There's going to be an increase in the personal exemption. That's called a middle class tax cut. And there's going to be a massive cut in the federal budget, because they are going to pass a balanced budget amendment, and once they cast a balanced budget amendment, they're going to have to put it on the line for how they're going to cut the budget.
How will the Clinton White House treat that kind of activity?
Well, if it adds up, I can see where Clinton's going to cooperate with these academic elites that are now coming in with the House Republicans. But there's some things that he's just going to veto. As much as you want a capital gains tax cut, and you see it on the horizon, I can't see Clinton not vetoing a capital gains tax cut.
Particularly if what we're doing is we're cutting capital gains, we're cutting Medicaid in order to pay for a capital gains tax cut. I think that's going to be kind of tough to sell.
What if he has an increase in the personal exemption tied into it?
Oh, I think there's a real possibility of a deal on the personal exemption.
With the capital gains tax, so he signs that.
Potentially.
There's also going to be a reconsideration of some of the legislation that we saw pass in the first 2 years of the Clinton administration. They may go back to motor voter. They may go back to... I lost my train of thought. There was another one. No, not family. No. Sorry,
Social Security, taxation of Social Security.
And the crime bill. The crime bill. That was my point. They wanted, it's part of the contract with America to have a real crime bill that will seriously address crime. I think that crime bill very badly damaged Democrats in this midterm election.
A critical part and a very appealing part to voters of the contract that the Republicans put out was term limits, Mark.
It was, and it's going to be interesting to see the tension now that the Republicans are in control of both houses. You have, for example, Bob Dole, the Republican leader in the Senate, has been there for 36 years. You have Strom Thurmond, who will be chairman of the Armed Services Committee, has been there for 38 years. Jesse Helms will be chairman of Foreign Relations, been there for 22. Mark Hatfield in Appropriations.
Same in the House, too.
28 years. Mr.
Walker.
Gingrich has been there for 18 years. So at what point does term limits then become a little bit inconsistent, if not hypocritical?
Do you enact them immediately, Bob? Do you make them effective immediately, or do you make them just prospective?
Well, I'm going to agree with Mark on this one thing. I think they are hypocritical on it because they don't believe in term limits, but the American people do.
And you do.
And I do, and they're going to insist that they do them.
And you are the American people.
Yes. Let me say one other thing about Senator Dole. Senator Dole, there's been a kind of an undercurrent of tension leading up to this election, whether Senator Dole would be permitted to become majority leader if they captured a majority and run for president at the same time. He said on Meet the Press last Sunday he was going to do both. I've been checking around. Nobody is going to cross him. They're going to let him do both.
Well, Mona, if that's true, don't you anticipate great tension between Senator Dole and Speaker Gingrich?
That's always possible, but Senator Dole, I think, will be drawn to the right by the results of this election. I mean, he's very, very good at putting his ear to the ground, and I think he will be facing a Republican Senate that is of a much different character from the one he leads now.
They're very, very different. And Dole has already been drawn to the right. I think it's not going to be so much philosophical as temperamental. Dole and Gingrich are very.
I mean, they just don't like each other much, do they, Bob?
Never have. And
no, but you know, Dole wants to sit down and make a deal and compromise. I mean, that's his natural inclination. Gingrich conceives himself as revolutionary.
Let me ask one quick question. Who will be the House Minority Leader in January?
Dick Gephardt.
Dick Gephardt. Everyone agree on that?
No question about what happens. Well, of course, we don't know at this moment. We assume that
Foley is more likely to lose.
But even if he does win, I don't think he'll be. He's not.
Who will be the Senate Minority Leader?
I would assume Tom Daschle because he's the only one running, but I'm not sure. I think it's open. Now, let me ask you, what effect does this election have on 1996, Margaret?
well, it depends how Clinton manages to work with these people. I mean, he may run against Congress, and that may be a good thing to do.
Okay, Bob?
I think the last time this happened, when the Republicans took over and after the 1946 election, they enacted a great program of legislation, Taft-Hartley, and a lot of good other progressive measures, which was repudiated by the Republican presidential candidate Dewey, and they lost to Truman. I think this time, whatever this Congress passes will be supported by the presidential candidate of the Republicans in '96 will be an asset for him.
After 40 years, we finally have a unique analysis of the 48 election.
That's right. Taft-Hartley was a progressive measure. That's an interesting thing. What it means, Al, is the Republican race is wide open. This is an absolutely unstructured, unfocused race. And let me tell you, Newt Gingrich, his final aspirations are not for the speakership. He wants to run for president.
What will determine, though, I mean, it looks like a slam dunk that Clinton will lose in 1996 from this vantage point now, but that is not necessarily in the cards, and I think everything depends upon how Republicans conduct themselves in the leadership positions they've just won.
Let me tell you this. I think that as painful as it's going to be the next couple of months, I think it's good for Bill Clinton in '96 that Republicans control both houses. It would have been worse for him if they almost gotten control.
It's good for America, too, isn't it?
Well, Bob, that depends on what they do. If they act responsibly, of course it'll be good for America, and we all can hope that. We will be back Saturday night at 7 o'clock Eastern Time, we think. This is Al Hunt saying goodbye for the Capitol Gang, and back to Bernie and Judy at the National Desk.
All right, thank you, Al Hunt. We have so much, really, as much as we've reported, there's still a lot out there. The Feinstein-Huffington race not resolved. Proposition 187, the anti-immigrant measure not resolved. We don't know about the race of Speaker Tom Foley. There's still more news to be reported tonight.
My headline out of this as a reporter would be, for the second time in 2 years, American voters have told Washington, change. If you don't, we will change you.
I think there's a mandate here. I'm not sure it's a mandate to move to the right. I think the mandate is that they want action, and they'd like to see bipartisanship. Republican Congress, Democratic president. Let's see if they can work together. It's going to be a big problem for Bill Clinton. Republicans in Congress could isolate themselves on the right. The Democrats who are left in Congress are more liberal than the ones who were there in the last Congress. They could leave the center to Bill Clinton, where he always works out best.
What does Bill Clinton think about all this? Tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, the president will hold a news conference. CNN will carry it live. Coming up next, here in these seats to continue our nonstop coverage, Lyndon Souls, Mary Tillotson. I'm Bernard Shaw.
I'm Judy Woodruff, and on behalf of Bill Snyder, we thank you all. It's been quite a night. CNN's coverage continues.